Anne-Marie Dulege.
Here.
Isabel Duron.
Here.
Judy Gasson.
Here.
David Higgins.
Here.
Steve Julesgaard.
Here.
Linda Malkus. Dave Martin.
Here.
Shlomo Melmed.
Here.
Lauren Miller.
Here.
Adriana Padilla. I saw Adriana. Are you on mute maybe? Okay, Adriana, you're on mute. I'm unmute. Are you there? Joe Panetta.
Here.
Francisco Prieto.
Here.
Robert Quint.
Here.
Al Rolette.
Here.
Suzanne Sandmeyer.
Here.
Jeff Sheehy.
Here.
Oz Stewart.
Here.
Jonathan Thomas.
Here.
Art Torres. Christina Vori.
Here.
Diane Winokur. Diane, you're also on mute. Keith Yamamoto.
Here.
So we will get back to Adriana and Diane shortly.
Thank you, Maria. So you all may recall that our last in-person board meeting was February 6th at the office. Obviously, the world has turned upside down since then, and things have changed dramatically. CIRM, all will be happy to know, has accommodated that change. We've been basically operating since the governor's shelter at home edict back in mid-March, all been on endless Zoom calls, all been engaging in what I feel has been a highly efficient mode. The team has worked great, led by Dr. Milan, and tirelessly. She will talk about a number of the things that has been going on in the interim there, but certainly nowhere is there an example of the work that CIRM has put in than how we have responded to the COVID crisis by initiating a round of awards towards looking for therapies, vaccines, or a cure for that disease. I'm very proud to say, as the state's principal medical grant-making body, have mobilized the entire CIRM universe, which counts the board, the GWG, and the members of the team in a way that I think is quite remarkable. Barely 6 weeks after the shelter at home order, we had put together a program to facilitate these awards and brought it to the board for a discussion about how to amend the program announcement for that sort of research. And since that time, I believe, if I'm counting correctly, in addition to that meeting, we've had 7 other meetings, a couple of them on the topic of potential vital research opportunities, and 5 board meetings where we have made awards, including today. And as part of that whole process, the grants working group has worked tirelessly, meeting every couple of weeks to entertain applications that have come in since the previous 2-week interval. And following that, we've gone immediately to the board later that week to discuss the recommendations of the GWG and to make the awards. I think the range of projects that we've had has been great, and we've gotten a tremendous response from scientists around the state who have submitted their projects for consideration. So we should all be very proud that this is obviously an unprecedented moment in time where the world literally is collaborating on trying to do everything it can to deal with this new disease. So that's just one of the things that we've been working on. As I say, Dr. Milan will get to a number of the others when she gives her president's report. We've also, as we've been operating internally, we've had a number of major events affecting our grantees. I'll just name three of those. We had, starting in March, of course, the $4.9 billion acquisition by Gilead of 47 Inc. That was followed in May by a $27 million Series D raise by Viasite, with some very big name private equity investors in that round. And in May as well, J-Site entering into its $252 million agreement with Santen Pharmaceuticals, Santer Pharmaceuticals, which is one of the global ophthalmology leaders in the field. All of this has been dramatic, and obviously in its effect on those companies, and very much further to our hope that we could have the grantees and spin-off companies that we have funded link up with funding sources and companies, et cetera, to take projects that are promising from where they stood when we funded them to the ultimate stages of clinical trials and hopefully on to commercialization. So we're very proud of that as well. And so I will now just move from that to sort of the next item. We're going to take a number of things a bit out of order as they were posted on the agenda, because there's a more, I think, a linear path here in these particular topics. So we're going at this point to talk about the initiative. And if you'll bear with me, I've got just a couple of introductory remarks here, which I'm going to read to make sure I get everything in detail. So as we've discussed in great detail, CIRM has just about run through its $3 billion authorized by Proposition 71 in 2004. In anticipation of that being the case, last year, Bob Klein, the author of Proposition 71, drafted a new initiative to re-up the agency and authorize an additional $5.5 billion to fund CIRM's work going forward. After meeting with the board and stakeholders for several months, Bob submitted the initiative to the Attorney General's office last November. The legislative analyst produced a fiscal analysis, and the AG's office produced a so-called title and summary of the initiative on December 17th, after which Bob was free to collect the 623,000 signatures needed to qualify the initiative for the November 2020 ballot. Bob collected 925,000 signatures, which then needed to be verified by the 58 county registrars throughout the state. That job was completed this past Monday and ended up, by the way, with 716,000 verified signatures, which were more than enough to meet the threshold to qualify for the ballot. As a result, the Secretary of State yesterday officially certified the initiative for the November ballot. We do not, as I understand it, as yet have a new proposition number to report, but we'll pass that along when we get one. Now that it's official, it's appropriate for the board to discuss whether or not we want to endorse the initiative. That is the matter currently on the table. Do I have a motion to endorse to begin the discussion on this topic?
I so move.
I second.
Moved by Dr. Blumenthal, seconded by, was that?
Diane.
Diane. Thank you, Diane. It's been moved and seconded. I'll now open up the topic for discussion. And Maria Bonneville, I believe you will be collecting hands raised for this and other topics?
I sure will be.
Okay, do we have comments by members of the board?
Yes, Christina Vori has a comment.
Thanks, Marianne. Thanks, JT, for the update. Not sure if this is the best time sort of to reflect back a little bit on CIRM, but I thought that this might as well be exactly the right time. So just from my personal perspective, I would really like to extend, obviously, thanks to Bob Klein and really citizens of California, who in the first place created this amazing experiment and what's now called CIRM. And hopefully we have a chance again to recreate it later this year. And as it comes to ICOC, I would really like to extend my thanks to those ICOC members who have been here really from the beginning. I think CIRM is something that does not exist anywhere else, and especially the group of both ICOC members and staff participating in this in the early days were really, I guess, the modern era 49ers of getting really the things done and off the ground. You know, we have debated along the ways, is CIRM perfect when we go about and do our business? The answer probably is not. I think there is also always opportunity to improve things from the way I look at it, good to great. And really in that context, really appreciate many of the comments made by ICOC members, especially some of the newer ones. We have made, I think, great strides. What's absolutely important as it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion, especially in clinical trials. Obviously, we need to understand whether therapeutics are effective and safe in patients we intend to treat at the end of the day, and clinical trials have to be reflective of that. I think we have made absolutely amazing contributions to the COVID-19 response based on the remarkably relevant expertise that our grantees have, and had along the way, as noted by various studies, significant positive economic effect as well, and that's absolutely desperately needed today and going forward in California. So from my perspective, CIRM, as it comes to medical research, is something that is, regardless whether we see some flaws, absolutely the best in the world as to what it does. And California certainly accordingly currently is, and my hope is that it absolutely remains the place to be if you want to do something that hasn't been done before, and that is absolutely groundbreaking research by California scientists that leads not only to treatments but also to cures for various unmet medical needs. So very much impressed and support what the plans are going forward.
Thank you, Christina.
Lauren Miller next, please.
Hi. Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to chime in to point out, in case anyone hasn't had time to look at it, that that the new proposal has $1.5 billion for neurological diseases. And as the Alzheimer's patient advocate, of course, I am well aware of how important a amount like $1.5 billion to neurological research. And that's for diseases, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, so many diseases that have no cures and no treatments and are set to cripple our economy and our state. I'm sure so many of you are aware that, of course, before the COVID of it all, California came out as sort of a leader as far as tackling Alzheimer's. I am proud to be a member of the California Alzheimer's Task Force led by Maria Shriver. And of course, some things, as I just said, have shifted because of the COVID of it all. But California has really, made a stake in the sand to say, hey, we are going to care about brains and brain health and the future of our citizens. And I am so thrilled that the new initiative has such such a huge goal of making an impact in these areas, because it is so important and so needed. And so I'm just so thrilled about it and so excited, and hope that we are able to use that money in an important way. Because, as an Alzheimer's patient advocate, I always say I help people today with care, and I teach them how to take care of their brains. But it is a amount like that can shift the needle as far as the science, as you all know, to potentially find a cure to change the course of diseases. So I am so thrilled about it, and excited to see it pass in the fall.
Thank you, Lauren.
George Blumenthal's next.
Well, like everyone else, I think it's a no-brainer that this is a huge benefit for California, and that CIRM has just done a fantastic job for curing a range of diseases over a period of time. I did think it might be useful to have General Counsel weigh in on the issue of the legality of the board actually taking a formal position on this. I think I know the answer to the question, but I think we should do this for the record.
Ann, would you handle that question, please?
Sorry, I had to take my mask off since I'm staying with my elderly parents right now. So we have opined internally that the board is allowed to take a position on this initiative. We are not, CIRM itself is not part of the campaign, but the board can take a position on the initiative.
Thank you.
We have Dave Martin next.
Thank you. And I certainly agree with George. This is a no-brainer. But I just wanted to make a comment from the perspective of an industrial scientist now, one time an academic scientist. One of the big issues in innovation in medicine, as well as other things, is taking the discovery ideas and moving them into commercial products. And as many people who are in the field understand, there's a gap, or what is frequently called the valley of death, when an idea, which is a very good idea, begins to get some validation or evaluation data, but not sufficient to be attractive to a commercial entity that actually has the wherewithal and the knowledge, experience to develop the product and then commercialize it. But if one just looks at the spectrum of opportunities for seeking grants, it's immediately apparent that they span from the very early discovery all the way into trials, clinical trials, not just phase 1, but some farther than that, that enable one to mine that gap and fill it, avoid the valley of death, whether that be for an academic scientist or a startup biotech company, et cetera, and put it into the hands in a very attractive package for a commercial entity that can actually complete the job. And I attribute that to the staff of CIRM. They have realized and recognized from their experience, and there are a couple of people who are particularly active and insightful there, who have understood that these ideas have to be funded properly in order to achieve that and produce that handoff. So CIRM is not only an initiator and a funder, but it becomes a catalyst. So it has incredible efficiency. And I think for the state of California, the citizens, the health of Californians, and the economics of the state, this is, as George said, this is a no-brainer. It is a wonderful opportunity to foster discovery and then provide the discovery, the path and the support and the expertise to actually hand it into a commercial entity.
Thank you, Dave.
Anne Marie Dulage, please.
Just in line with all the kudos, I wanted to congratulate Bob Klein for taking this initiative and then collecting all the signatures, but particularly our friend Don Reed, who I believe is not on the call right now, but as we know, did a tremendous work in indeed collecting all the signatures, particularly at one of the most horrendous times in his life. So I just wanted to congratulate and thank him.
Thank you, Anne Marie.
And that is, that's, oh, yeah, no, that's all for hands raised.
Okay, there are no further comments from members of the board.
JT, can I make a comment? A quick comment? Just
Certainly.
to JT. Sorry about that, Maria. I didn't pay attention to you.
Okay.
Good morning, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. Everything you've just heard from folks is absolutely true. The value of CIRM, the efficiency, the professionalism, and Lauren touched on it a bit from the patient's point of view. But as the Parkinson's patient advocate on the board, I sort of look at this from a very different angle. But what most of you probably don't know is that I come from a long line of royalty, I like to call it, of Parkinson's disease. I was diagnosed in 2011. My mother died from Lewy body dementia. Her mother had Parkinson's disease, and in fact was in one of the first levodopa trials in the 1960s. And my uncle, my mother's brother, had Parkinson's, and my mother's great uncle had Parkinson's. So I've lived a life sort of in and around Parkinson's, including myself. And all I can tell you is that the entire community, Parkinson's and other diseases as well, survive on hope. Excuse me. And CIRM is a big part of that. And like it or not, it takes a lot of money, a lot of money, a lot of professionalism, a lot of dedication on the part of a lot of people to make this happen. And it is happening. And I feel comfortable that in the next round of funding, especially as Lauren pointed out to you, the $1.5 billion of that $5.5 billion is going to be focused on neurological diseases. I think we can take the ball across the finish line. And I just want to thank everybody at CIRM on the staff, as well as the board, for the hard work and the commitment that it takes to get to where we are. It's very personal for me. Thanks.
Thank you very much, David, and thank you all for your comments. I appreciate it very much. Are there any more comments by members of the board?
Suzanne has her hand raised.
Yeah, so I would just like to add that after, it's a little hard to make a general comment after some of the really heartfelt comments, but I just think we should acknowledge that at a time when even California is having an incredible difficulty communicating the importance of science and scientific evidence to the public, I think that CIRM has played a very important role in this. And especially leading up in during the campaign for the ballot measure, I think that CIRM continues to really be a pioneer in the area of explaining science to the public. And the public's been motivated by the results that they see. And I think you can't underestimate the importance of that communication pipeline to the public. So I just want to acknowledge CIRM for its tremendous efforts in public education.
Thank you, Suzanne. Any other comments by members of the board? Hearing none, do we have comments by members of the public?
We do, JT. Bob Klein would like to make comments.
Bob, the floor is yours. Bob, you may be on mute.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
So first of all, thank you for this opportunity, and thank all of the members of the board and the scientific staff of the agency for your service to the public and to patients in California and everywhere, because your advances of medical science have been remarkable. Okay. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Let's see.
No, we can hear you, Bob.
Okay, you can hear me.
Yes.
Speaking as a patient advocate and as the lead sponsor of the 2020 stem cell initiative, I had a few comments. We all know this funding has the ultimate goal of reducing human suffering and saving the lives of those we love and citizens of California, as well as the nation and the world. It is important in this time of crisis for California that we also remember that California voters analyzed this choice of an initiative back in 2004, also a time of crisis in California. It was California's largest economic crisis in 50 years, and California voters had to balance the cost of chronic disease that they realized must be faced and mitigated if California's broader goals as a state were to succeed, whether those goals be in education, social justice, or affordable housing, or of any of the broad spectrum of goals we have as a state. It's important to realize in analyzing that some recent data coming from the Coalition Fighting Chronic Disease, which is an association of 100 medical organizations and patient advocacy groups. And that association calculated the cost of chronic disease in California alone at $4.7 trillion. $4.7 trillion between 2016 and 2030, just a 15-year period. They said in looking at this, if the programs of this other programs of the state are survive, we have to save the material part of this. And the only large block of funds they could see saving were $900 billion that could be saved through which they called novel therapies and treatment innovations. Stem cell and genetic therapies and the discoveries of the disease process through basic science, a study of this field, are a key candidate for that critical savings we must have if the state's other goals are to be sustained. With the new stem cell initiative, Californians have an opportunity to build on the remarkable record that the agency and the scientists in California and the companies in California have built of advancing medical science, both basic science and breakthroughs in therapies, from cancer to diabetes, from blindness to enhancing the lives of patients on kidney dialysis. But California voters, in addressing those challenges, also in this initiative have a structural benefit of being able to fund this economic this advancement in science with really creating concurrently an economic job recovery stimulus program through the agency's direct funding, through matching funds, and through the multiplier effect on California's economy, as recently validated by the USC study. Two key features assure this stimulus will not detract from California's other key challenges, whether in social justice, education, climate change, or other priorities. First, remember the initiative structure provides that there are no general fund payments in the first 5 years. It is the 6th year before there's any payment from the general fund. And based upon the history recently documented by the USC study, the new tax revenue generated from CIRM's funding across the state and the multiplier effect of that funding should create enough new revenue to carry the bond payments through at least year 9. That means California has a 10-year window to advance this therapy without detracting from other key social priorities, so we can address the critical needs of our families, our loved ones, the citizens of California, to mitigate suffering, to save lives, while knowing that we are not detracting from the economic recovery of the state. We are a stimulus program, a job recovery program for the state, while addressing these healthcare priorities. Because the health of California's citizens is the key to sustaining and now restoring California's future opportunities in the economic leadership for its citizens, in education, enhancing social justice, and in meeting our aspirations, our hopes to lessen the suffering and or save the lives of those we love from chronic disease. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Bob. And I'd like to join other members of the board in thanking you and your team for your Herculean effort in drafting and signature gathering and qualifying this measure for the ballot. Other comments by members of the public?
If members of the public could press *9 to speak. We don't have any other comments, JT.
Okay, thank you, Maria. Hearing none, Maria, will you please call the roll?
George Blumenthal,
Yes.
Linda Boxer, Ken Burtis. You're on mute, Dr. Burtis.
Yes.
Deborah Deese, Anne-Marie Dulege,
Yes.
Isabel Duron,
Yes.
Judy Gasson,
Yes.
David Higgins,
Yes.
Steve Julesgard,
Yes.
Linda Malkus, Dave Martin,
Yes.
Shlomo Melmed,
Yes.
Lauren Miller,
Yes.
Adriana Padilla,
Yes.
Joe Panetta,
Yes.
Francisco Prieto,
Aye.
Robert Quint,
Yes.
Al Rolette,
Yes.
Suzanne Sandmeyer,
Yes.
Jeff Sheehy,
No.
Oz Stewart,
Yes.
Jonathan Thomas,
Yes.
Christina Vori,
Yes.
Diane Winokur,
Yes.
Keith Yamamoto.
Yes.
The motion passes.
Getting a little ahead of things there.
I know, my mistake.
Thank you all for that discussion. Bob, we all wish you the best of luck going forward between now and November, and look forward to the evening of that vote and a celebration of passage. So thanks so much again for all that you have done on behalf of patients everywhere. Okay, so that concludes that agenda item. We are now going to take another one out of order, which is one of the bittersweet tasks that we face as time rolls on, which is the departure of any of our highly valued ICOC members. And this today is the last meeting, official meeting for Dr. Burtis, representing UC Davis, which he has done either as an alternate from 2009 to 2013, supporting Dr. Claire Pomeroy, and since 2013 as the member of the board on behalf of UC Davis. So he's been here 11 years. He has been invaluable. Personally, he and I have had many discussions over the years on multiple topics, and I've always found him to have just tremendous insight, and he has served as a great source of advice and inspiration to me, as well as he has to the ICOC in dealing with all the topics that we've had since he has been on the board. So you'll notice on the agenda, there's posted a glowing resolution of, referencing Ken's career and work. I refer you to that to get the full flavor of all that he has experienced and accomplished. And I would like to ask for a motion that we approve this resolution commending Dr. Burtis for his many years of service. Do I hear a motion?
So moved. So moved.
Second.
Second.
Moved by Dr. Prieto, and who is that second by? I'm sorry.
George.
Dave.
Dr. Blumenthal. Okay. Thank you. Do we have comments by members of the board? And again, Maria will track those.
Could raise your hands, that'd be great. Oh, Lauren, I see Lauren's. Oh, okay. We'll raise on the screen. Okay, Lauren, why don't you start?
I just wanted to say that I sat next to you at my first meeting where I was so extraordinarily overwhelmed, and you went out of your way to explain these wild science words to me that I still don't really understand, but you did your very best, and that always meant a lot to me, how comfortable you made me feel. And you will certainly be missed, especially because you explain things as a human often, and I almost always understand what you're saying, and that is so appreciated by me and my normal brain. And so thank you so much for everything you've done, and wish you the best from here on out.
I think Anne Marie had her hand raised as well.
Yes, of course, Ken. What can I say? We will miss you tremendously. You are, among others, the voice of reason, the person who indeed translates science into general terms so well. Such a great judgment, and also a consistent smile and poise and upbeat mood as well, which makes it even more lovely to work with you. So thank you so much, and we'll stay in touch, but we'll certainly miss you.
Other comments by members of the board? Maria, do you?
I don't, if someone's waving on the screen, I haven't seen them, and there's no hands raised on the side.
Okay. Well, let's, before we vote, let's turn this over to Dr. Burtis for a few concluding comments. Ken, if you would, please.
I'll be very short, but it's been a real honor and a privilege to work with this board over the years, for supporting Claire and then after. I have just been amazed and astounded over the year at all the passion and the dedication that not just the members of the board, but the staff of CIRM, who have just been amazing people to work with and to learn from over the years. So, I have every meeting over the years has been something interesting has come up. There always is a moment of drama, and then there's always a resolution. And in the end, this board always seems to do what's right for the people of the state and for the people that we're serving. So again, just been a huge honor and privilege. I'm leaving you in good hands. I found a great replacement, the new dean of our medical school. And I think just join all of you in hoping for the best this fall and looking forward to the next epoch of CIRM. I'll be watching closely and may come be an observer in the audience for some meetings so I can say hi once things are back in person again. So thank you all very much for everything that you do. Thank you, JT.
Yeah. Maria, will you call the roll?
Really quickly, Art will be joining. He had a other business to take care of this morning, so he'll be joining in a bit, and I'm sure he's going to want to say some things as well. So that's just a little preview for you. Okay, I'll call the roll. George Blumenthal.
Emphatically, yes.
Ken Burtis. Yes.
Conflict of interest.
Anne-Marie Dulege.
Yes, of course.
Isabel Duron.
Yes.
Judy Gasson.
Yes.
David Higgins.
Yes.
Steve Julesgaard.
Yes.
Linda Malkus. Dave Martin.
Yes.
Shlomo Melmed.
Yes.
Lauren Miller.
Yes.
Adriana Padilla.
Yes.
Joe Panetta.
Yes.
Francisco Prieto.
Aye.
Robert Quint.
Yes.
Al Rolette.
Yes.
Suzanne Sandmeyer.
Yes.
Jeff Sheehy.
Yes.
Oz Stewart.
Yes, and thank you, Ken.
Thanks, Oz.
Jonathan Thomas.
Yes.
Art Torres. Christina Vori.
Yes, and thank you, Ken.
Diane Winokur.
Yes.
Keith Yamamoto.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thanks very much, Ken. We'll miss you. Please stay in touch.
Thank you. Thank you all, and I will.
Okay, that concludes the chair's report and affiliated action items. We're going to turn the agenda over now to Dr. Milan for the president's report.
Thank you, Chairman Thomas. Doug, can I have the slide deck up, please? Thank you so much. Chairman Thomas, members of the board, members of the public, and colleagues, this morning I'd like to present an update on our transition plan. And in following the board's endorsement of the initiative, this plan is related to what's currently on the budget from the current Prop 71 funding and is a introduction into the operational budget request that Sheila will be presenting after me. I think I lost a slide deck. Can you guys still see it, or?
I think Doug's getting it back up. There it is.
Okay, thank you, Doug. Next slide, please. So you'll recall that in November 2017, I presented a transition plan to the budget, to the board with an associated budget projection related to what the wind down would look like should CIRM not receive any additional funds. The operating assumptions at that time, and the assumptions are the principles by which we've operated since the board had agreed to this transition plan, is that the CIRM team would continue to execute on the bold 5-year strategic plan as approved by the ICOC in December of 2015. And that we would maintain a critical personnel level that would be required to execute on this plan while maintaining operational excellence in managing the awards that CIRM has in its portfolio. We proposed and the board agreed that it's essential to preserve CIRM's value proposition to increase the probability and speed by which stem cell treatments can reach patients, and to preserve this for as long as possible and as able with the remaining operational budget available to us. Today, I'll be giving an update to this transition plan. Next slide, please. But I'd like to first give an update on where we are with the strategic plan, which, as you recall, was a major focus of what the transition plan and operational budget supported. So as you'll recall, in December 2015, launched in January 2016, CIRM, under the leadership of Randy Mills, had launched a very bold 2016-2020 set of goals that we lovingly call the Big Six. And the purpose of these goals is to measure whether we were actually accomplishing what we sought to do, which is to accelerate through our operations and through how we conduct business, the ability to take science and to translate them, bringing into clinics. And so the 6 measures include bringing 50 new candidates into our pipeline. And I'm pleased to say that even with our shrinking research budget, we were able to fund 46 new candidates coming into discovery. And if the board approves the additional 2 COVID program announcements today, one of them is a supplement, but that would add 47 really COVID total new candidates funded. Another goal is to be able to progress our projects through development, and we've seen that we have been able to double the number of programs progressing from discovery to translation or translation to the clinical stage. At the time that we launched this plan, it was noted that the regulatory pathways were just not compatible with the type of programs that we're funding. The 21st Century Cures Act allowed the creation of an expedited pathway and FDA reform. CIRM programs were some of the first to obtain RMAT designation, and now we still hold a great proportion of RMAT designations, and this has benefited our programs. I have presented at the last board meeting the progress of our clinical programs, many of them progressing very quickly in an adaptive manner through the stages toward approval. The other goal is to shorten time to clinical testing, and our surrogate markers for that is how quickly our programs can achieve an IND within 2 years, which is a very ambitious timeline. And as we stand, 72% of our IND enabling programs have been able to achieve an IND within 2 years. And then one of the most remarkable goals that we had, and we didn't think by any stretch of the imagination we would get close, was to expand our clinical portfolio to bring in 50 new clinical trials. And I'm pleased to say that today we have brought in 46 new clinical trials, bringing our total number of CIRM, directly funded CIRM clinical trials to 63. And if the COVID clinical trial that's brought to the board today is approved, that would bring us up to 47 of the 50. And as you heard earlier from Chairman Thomas, we have had an amazing increase in industry pull, nearly double just this past year through the acquisition of 47 Inc., bringing us up to a total $8.7 billion in industry investment into our programs, increasing the leverage of our funds to $10.3 billion. Next slide, please. So in addition to achieving the goals of the strategic plan, which we are targeted to either meet or exceed, the CIRM team has continued to be on full speed ahead mode, actively working to achieve these goals, but also managing the impact of the COVID crisis and actually launching within a 1 to 2 week period, a special COVID funding opportunity with a recurring 2-week review cycle. We're targeted to have virtual Bridges meeting, Alpha Clinic Symposia, and a grantee meeting is currently in its planning stages. And we have the landmark Cure Sickle Cell MOU with the NHLBI, which is yielding extremely promising programs coming into this. We have one that we funded along with the NIH Mark Walters program, and at least 3 very exciting programs that are in preparation to come in the next few months. In addition, the team has been looking through the records, reading papers, and looking at meeting reports and white papers to inform us and what we bring to you so that when you consider strategic concepts that we can provide dimension and color where needed. And then in the future, when we do deep dives, that will be available to the board. Next slide, please. And I'll be going over that topic later on in the meeting. So as an update on what we have currently available in our research budget, we have currently $2 million approximately for the COVID-19 special program. And if today's grants are approved for funding, that'll leave us with $920,000 for the COVID-19 program. We still have 25 million. As you recall, we borrowed from the sickle cell program to launch the COVID-19 program that has now been paid back. So approximately $26 million still remains within the sickle cell program. And as I mentioned, we have 3 clinical trials that we expect to be coming in this year to apply for that funding. And the board approved allocation of $1.2 million approximately for progression awards that was built into the discovery stage projects and their contracts. And $250,000 is set aside for the planned grantee meeting. We currently have $19.3 million in unallocated recovered funds. And this is the subject of what we'll be requesting from the board today, is the allocation of those funds. Next slide, please. So for your reference and to aid in the discussion about how to allocate these funds, I laid out 3 potential scenarios with an available fund, unallocated fund of 19.3 million. Scenario A would use the entire 19.3 million and allocate that to clinical trials. It would it would fit into the 2-month cycle, be compatible with review along with the sickle cell program. So in terms of administrative ease, that would fit in quite nicely into the current clinical programs. And the concept changes that would be associated with this, including language related to equity and diversity, would be to reduce the budget to 75% of the previous budget for the given phase, and whether it's a nonprofit or for-profit, and reduce the award duration to 3 years that's compatible with a potential wind down. The estimated number of projects that scenario would fund is between 2 and 3 clinical trials, depending on the budgets for those applications. I'm going to go ahead through the scenarios unless the board would like to discuss that scenario separately. Chairman Thomas?
Maria, why don't you go through the 3, and then members of the board, the idea after Dr. Milan has finished that discussion is to seek a motion to adopt one of the 3 scenarios, or a 4th if there is one that a member would like to propose, and then to trigger discussion of the scenarios once we have a motion on the table. So Dr. Milan, please proceed with scenarios B.
Scenario B would be to fund the 2 extremes of our continuous funding pillars, which is to fund discovery 2 programs, which are discovering new candidates. That's related to the first of the big 6 goals. And then also funding clinical trial awards, CLIN2s, that relates to another big 6 goal, which is to build the clinical trial portfolio. In this scenario, the awarded frequency and operational burden would not be increased above what the scenario A had, which is that it would fit in nicely with the sickle cell program. But in addition, there would be expected to be a single review for all DISC 2 applications to be reviewed at the same time in order that the board can make programmatic decisions on which of those programs would be funded under the allocated amount for the DISC 2. The recommendation is to allocate $2 million under this scenario to DISC 2 programs, and that would allow a funding of approximately 8 DISC 2 programs and 2 clinical trial programs. The proposed concept change, in addition to the CLIN 2 changes I had mentioned, would be to reduce the award duration to 1 year and $250,000 allocation, which mirrors the duration and allocation that we have for the COVID DISC 2 awards. And then scenario C would open it up to any combination of DISC 2, TRAN, CLIN 1, and CLIN 2 awards. This would require upfront allocation because otherwise it would be very difficult to administer this and to be able to predict how to organize the review. And Dr. Sombrano is also online, can speak to any types of administrative or review considerations. It would contemplate a rolling review for both the CLIN 1 and CLIN 2. Again, those could fit with the sickle cell program reviews, and a single review where DISC and TRAN applications would be taken together in either the third quarter or the early fourth quarter of this year. In terms of concept changes, in addition to those already mentioned, the proposal would be to decrease the award amount to $3 million for nonprofit and $2 million for for-profit. And the TRAN 1 award would be $2 million over 2 years. Just as an estimate, this would allow CIRM to fund 1 clinical trial, 1 IND enabling study under the CLIN 1, 2 translational awards, and 9 DISC 2 awards. There are also other scenarios that the board may, choose to consider at this point, but that I think concludes the scenario presentation, and I'll turn it over to Chairman Thomas.
Thank you, Dr. Milan. Do I hear a motion to approve any of scenarios A, B, or C to get the discussion going?
So moved.
We need.
This is Dave Martin. I would propose that we award or we pursue scenario B.
Okay.
This is Christina. I'll second that.
Okay. Motion to approve scenario B, seconded. Motion by Dave Martin, seconded by Dr. Borey. Discussion.
I don't see any hands raised. I don't know if someone's waving to me, but on the screen, there's not.
Okay. We all understand, of course, in voting for scenario B, we are not voting for scenarios A or C. So any proponents of those scenarios or any others, speak now or forever hold your peace.
I think Oz has raised his hand.
I do not see.
Thank you. So just if you could, I was sort of anticipating that we would maybe discuss the strengths and weaknesses before there would be a specific motion. Let me say that I am, in principle, a bit more favorable towards scenario C, and it kind of goes to my general strategy, which is we don't know what's out there. Let's cast the net broadly and see. And I understand that there certainly would be some strategic difficulties in actually implementing that because of the need to allocate upfront and so forth. And I know we're putting a huge burden on Gil and all the rest of the CIRM team if we would consider that. So basically what I'd like is just for those who made the motion for scenario B, if you could unpack your reasons for favoring that just a bit. Thank you.
This is Dave Martin, and I proposed or nominated, proposed the B. I like the heavily weighted, at least in terms of number of awards, to the Discovery 2 because I think that is an important opportunity to get some of those really off the ground. But at the same time, funding 2 CLIN2 trials, because that is positioning those selected trials for achieving or passing through the gap, the valley of death, et cetera, and put them towards funding and commercial development for patients to benefit from those trials. And so to me, it's a mix of trying to achieve the transition into commercial development, or to enable that, catalyze that, as I said before, but at the same time preserving the discovery efforts to eventually, whether we are funded or not, at least get them to for the second proposition, the new proposition, to get them positioned for further advance.
And Christina has her hand raised.
So I agree with both Dave and us. I favor scenario B for the same reason that was already stated. I view the DISC2 and CLIN2 really mechanistically the 2 most important activities at this time for CIRM. And as I absolutely agree with you, I would love to see us to fund the best proposals, regardless what mechanism they come through, but the practicalities just weigh in for me to favor the scenario B at this time over C.
Other comments from members of the board?
JT?
Yes.
Yeah, this is Francisco. So philosophically, I think I agree with Oz. I feel that we ought to cast our net widely because we don't know what's out there. And we've certainly seen the fruits of that over the lifespan of CIRM so far. But I would favor B just because I think our resources, both in terms of money and staff and scientific time, are limited unless the new initiative passes. And I think this is probably the most reasonable way to proceed with the limited funds that we have left.
Thank you, Dr. Prieto. Other comments by members of the board? Maria, anybody waving their hands there?
I can't see anyone. Nope.
Thank you. Comments by members of the public? None, Maria?
I see no hands.
Okay. Maria, will you please call the roll?
George Blumenthal.
Yes.
Ken Burtis.
Yes.
Deborah Dees, Anne-Marie Dulege,
Yes.
Isabel Duron,
Yes.
Judy Gasson,
Yes.
David Higgins,
Yes.
Steve Julesgaard,
Yes.
Linda Malkus, Dave Martin,
Yes.
Shlomo Melmed,
Yes.
Lauren Miller,
Yes.
Adriana Padilla,
Yes.
Joe Panetta,
Yes.
Francisco Prieto,
Aye.
Robert Quint,
Yes.
Al Roulette,
Yes.
Suzanne Sandmeyer,
Yes.
Jeff Sheehy,
Yes.
Oz Stewart,
Yes.
Jonathan Thomas,
Yes.
Art Torres,
Aye.
Christina Vori,
Yes.
Diane Winokur,
Yes.
Keith Yamamoto.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you, Maria. Dr. Milan, will you continue?
Next slide, please. Thank you very much. Thank you. Next slide, please. So that brings us to the operational budget, and this is an introduction that will be that will lead into Sheila Silva Martin's presentation of the proposed budget. In November 2017, we proposed a projection of what we call the little bucket projection throughout the period of the transition into wind down. We have converted that to make the terminology uniform into an operational budget, which simply means the little bucket administrative funds plus the amount of the funds that come out of the big bucket to fund the rest of the administration that relates to the legal grants management staff. And so as you'll see, according to fiscal years, the 17, 18, and 18, 19 are actuals for the updated transition plan. We were under what the allocated ask was, as well as the projection. In 1920, we are projected to also be below the projected. This has allowed us to retain a good core staff that has allowed us to carry out the activities I presented earlier. But if there is a wind down in November 2020, what will happen is there will be a marked decrease in budget for operations related to a significant reduction in force that would leave 2 phases of a wind down. The first phase occurring between January and June 2021, and I'll describe what those activities will be. So there'll be initially a 47% reduction in force, leaving a smaller group to do that initial phase of the closeout. And then beyond June of 2021, there will be less than a handful of employees between a combination between full-time and part-time staff to continue to close out do the closeout activities and manage the active awards through the duration of the awards that is estimated to be at the end of 2023. And so this budget projection reflects that with the available operational budget that is currently available to CIRM. Next slide, please. This outlines what the activities will be in the phase 1 of the closeout. So the idea is that a very small skeleton crew will be able to finalize in a pretty accelerated fashion, creating an operations plan for the closeout so that the remaining personnel would be able to have most things taken care of that can be taken care of, and then also have the handoff of critical aspects of the operations for the agency and meeting the obligations, state and legal obligations of the agency. And those are all listed. Happy to take any questions in terms of specifics. In addition, between November to June, the CIRM team will be handing off the portfolio to the closeout team. The closeout team I refer to are those remaining beyond June 2021. And all of the IT and facilities will be prepared accordingly. The July 2021 to December 2023 will be spent managing remaining awards, executing on the operations plan as highlighted above, and finalizing agency closure. We do hope, especially with the robust conversation and the support that the board has expressed, that we will not have to trigger this wind down plan. But this plan is put in place so that we make sure that we take care of everything we need to take care of should this occur with the remaining operations funds we have. I'm happy to take any questions at this time before I hand it off to Sheila.
Maria, maybe you covered this, but could you recapitulate what happens to the staff in November should the ballot measure not pass? I'm just concerned that staff may disperse just because of the uncertainty of their situation. So would they be still completely employed during November?
Thank you so much, Dr. Sandmeyer. From between November and the end of December, the current staffing would remain where it is, and the reduction would occur in January, by January of 2021.
Okay, thank you. I'm sure you said that, but I didn't.
I didn't, and I appreciate you bringing it up. Thank you.
Maria, this is Dave Martin. I would just say that I'm very impressed, just from a business perspective, what a very well laid out, responsible wind down plan this is. It's wonderful to have the opportunity to plan that much in advance, but and I think it's planned very well, and I certainly will do everything I possibly can to make certain we do not have to execute on the plan.
Thank you very much. I want to say that the commitment of the CIRM team, their understanding and their commitment to doing whatever it takes to run full sprint all the way till November, but also understanding that this may be necessary, has been incredibly helpful, because it is a tough thing to talk about and to plan. Thank you.
Hey, Maria.
Thank you, Sheila. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Maria.
Hey, Doug, can you put up my presentation, please? Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Thank you for the opportunity to present the 2021 budget proposal. So if we can move on to slide number 3, please. I just want to briefly go over the agenda and what the presentation this morning will cover. So first, we'll look at the 1920 fiscal year, which will end this coming Tuesday on June 30th. We'll look at what we were allocated to spend for the fiscal year, where we expect to end with our expenses, and what drove those results. Then we'll look at the 2021 budget request. And then I'll just go over, although Dr. Milan has already covered it, I also will go over the available funds that we have through the 23-24 fiscal year. And then I do want to mention that in your package, you should have received an appendix that I won't review, but it does provide you with department level budget detail for each of our cost centers. So first, moving on to the 1920 fiscal year and the final results. So looking at the chart on slide number 5. So this represents the budget at the categorical level. So the first column of numbers represents what this board approved for us to spend during the 1920 fiscal year. So as you can see, that was just above $15.6 million. The second column represents where we think we'll end the fiscal year next Tuesday. And we think we're going to be at about $13.7, $13.8 million of actual spend. And the last column is the variance, the savings or overrun. And as you can see, we anticipate an overall savings of about $1.9 million. As you can see in the variance column too, there are a couple of areas where we have some fairly significant dollar savings. And so I'd like to cover those areas and talk about why they occurred. So as you can see on slide number 6, this pie chart identifies the three areas where we had the most savings: employee expenses, external services, reviews, meetings, and workshops. So now I'll go over each one of them. So first, looking at employee expenses, this is where we experienced the largest savings, almost $1 million. So why did this occur? Well, the 1920 budget supported 40 positions. We actually had 40 positions filled at the beginning of the fiscal year, but we are now down to 33 filled positions. So we have experienced 7 vacancies throughout the fiscal year. And instead of filling those vacancies, we left them unfilled and we took the work from those positions and we redirected it to our existing staff. So that resulted in about an 8% savings, or almost $1 million savings. But more importantly, it also provided opportunities for our existing staff. So they are now able to gain new skills. So really, this was a win-win all the way around for us in these lower expenses in this categorical area. So another area where we had fairly significant savings, we anticipate that we'll only spend about 75% of the budget, and we will have about 25% savings, or about $350,000 is in external services. So we have many contracts in place to support a lot of our tasks, like our GWGs, our ICOC board meetings, our legal team, to name a few. So when we hold in-person meetings, we incur expenses for various services. For example, audiovisual services. Well, during the 1920 fiscal year, as we all know, we were faced with a pandemic. When COVID-19 hit, we had to find a way to continue operations without in-person meetings. All of our teams across the organization went to work to implement new processes for holding our meetings. As a result of these new processes, some of the external services expenses that we normally incur for in-person meetings did not occur for telephonic meetings. So not only did these new methods prove to be effective, they resulted in savings. Another area that contributed to the savings in external services was from our legal office. As you probably are aware, over the course of the last few years, our legal team has gotten smaller and smaller. I think at one time we had something like 5 or 6 people supporting our legal office, and now we're down to 1 person. So to ensure that Ben has the resources that he needs to fulfill his legal responsibilities, we included contingent funds in the 1920 budget. Should he need some type of external services for some specialized legal services. So for most of those contingent expenses that we budgeted for, they did not materialize, and that too contributed to the savings in this area. So as I indicated earlier, we are going to have savings in this area of about 33%, or somewhere between $275,000 to $300,000. Another area where we anticipate lower costs, for external services, it was 24% and $350,000. So another area where we are experiencing lower costs is in our reviews, meetings, and workshops. So when we developed the 1920 budget, we anticipated that we would have some meetings in person, and then we would host some of these meetings telephonically. Well, this was another area that was obviously drastically impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. Reviews that we normally held in person could no longer take place because of travel restrictions and social distancing requirements. But that did not stop our team. Not only did we hold all of our scheduled reviews, caps and taps, but as you know, this board approved and our team moved forward and held new reviews for the COVID-19. And they were able to do all of this while saving money. We did budget for some meetings and workshops that, because of the pandemic, did not materialize during the year, and they too contributed to the savings that we're seeing in this area. So that's the 1920 fiscal year. I'd like to now move over to the proposed budget for the 2021 fiscal year. So before I go over the numbers, I just want to talk a little bit about the proposed budget. So the budget that I'm about to present is very different from the budgets that we presented in the past. As Dr. Milan mentioned earlier, we have very limited funds for awards. We have under $50 million for new awards. So for the first half of the year, as she indicated, from July through December of 2020, we will continue our current operations. We will continue to fund COVID-19, sickle cell, and then other awards as you've just approved. And we will continue to manage our various portfolios. So the budget for the first half of the fiscal year supports the resources to do that and maintains our current staffing levels. The second half of the budget request assumes that we don't get any additional funds and that we will have to implement a wind down. So as Dr. Milan indicated, the wind down will occur in 2 phases. We'll have a small wind down at the end of December as of January, and then we'll have an additional wind down that will happen in June of 2021. And then which will result in a reduced core crew beginning in July of 2021. So I do want to talk about some wind down costs that we anticipate will occur during this fiscal year. So if we can move on to slide number 12, please. Okay, we have there. Okay. So again, this assumes that we don't get any additional funds. So what type of wind down costs will we have? Well, a major wind down cost that we will incur are, and is included in the budget, are funds for leave buyouts. So what is this? Well, as a state agency, the state of California provides an annual leave program to its employees. So employees earn anywhere from 15 hours to 20 hours a month, depending on their years in state service. This program is meant to cover any type of leave that the employee may need. So the annual leave program allows them to take vacation. They can take leave for they're sick or a family member sick, if they have any kind of catastrophic event that they need to be gone from the office. This leave provides for that time. But the program also provides that when an employee is separated from state service, the state has to provide a cash payment for any balances that these employees hold on the books. The state recognizes that this is a contingent liability, and so does CIRM each year, because we do include the dollar amounts that are contingent liability for this item in our annual audited financial statements. Another cost, although it's not big, but we are going to anticipate we'll have expenses for, is in our asset disposal. Because we are a state agency, we just can't get rid of our assets by throwing them in the garbage can or giving them away to somebody. We actually have to go through a very specific protocol. So if the assets are still considered usable, we have to turn them over to the state so that they can either redistribute them to other state agencies, or they can provide them for resale, which then generates money for the general fund. So some of the costs associated with asset disposal are the CIRM staff time that is going to be needed to prepare the items for disposal. As an example, disposal of computers and telephones. Our IT team will have to work actively to prepare these items for disposal because they often contain sensitive information. There is a process that we have to go through to sanitize each and every item. When we dispose of furniture, it has to be inventoried, it has to be evaluated to determine what its usefulness is, and then we have to prepare various paperwork for both items to submit to the Department of General Services. If the Department of General Services decides that they want the property, then we have to, as owners of the property, we have to then make arrangements for someone to come dismantle the furniture, prepare it for moving over to DGS, and we have to hire movers then to move it over to Sacramento. So the budget does contain a small amount for those types of services that we'll have to procure. As Dr. Milan mentioned earlier, we will be actively engaged in various wind down activities, and we have retained some of our staff to enable us to do that. So aside from offboarding staff, working on asset disposal, portfolio handoff, we will be needing to coordinate with the various state agencies to ensure that data is handed off properly and that critical records are maintained. So this requires, as I said, a small group of staff from January through June to perform these duties. So the salaries and their associated benefits for these positions are included as part of the wind down costs as well. So now let's look at what the budget looks like for the 2021 fiscal year. So this chart provides the budget broken down into two halves of the fiscal year. So for the first half of the fiscal year from July through December, we will maintain our current staff to support our current operations. So the request for the current half, so the first half of the year is $7.2 million. We will have a small wind down at the end of December. And then from January through June, we will be performing wind down activities. And the budget request from January through June is just under $5.2 million for a total of just a little bit over $12.3 million. I mentioned earlier the leave buyout wind down cost, so I want to bring your attention to that item. It is listed in the second row of the expenses of the budget. And as you can see, it's broken out into the two halves. So for those individuals that, for the positions that we would eliminate in December, we have included the funds during the first half of the year. And then for the ones in June, they are reflected in the second half of the year. So then looking at this budget request against where we expect to end the fiscal year. So moving on to the next slide, please. As I indicated earlier, we think that we're going to end the fiscal year at about $13.8 million. And our request for the 2021 fiscal year is just over $12.3 million. So looking at this, at comparing these year over year. So moving on to our next slide, please. So just looking at the current year, as I indicated earlier, we were authorized to spend $15.6 million. We're going to spend somewhere around $13.8 million. So we will have savings of about $1.8 million. So we were able to accomplish our strategic goals, even though we experienced 7 vacancies, and while having to drastically change how we conduct business in the face of a pandemic. And with the support of this board, we were able to quickly redirect funds to fund COVID-19 research projects. This was all accomplished by almost $2 million under budget. So that's pretty amazing. The 2021 budget request is $11.1 million for ongoing portfolio management and wind down activities, plus the $1.2 million for the one-time leave buyout cost. In comparing the 2021 budget request to the 1920 estimated to finish, the budget request is $1.4 million lower, even with the $1.2 million for the leave buyout. So moving on to the next slide, I just want to talk briefly about what is driving some of the major costs for the 2021 fiscal year. So as I mentioned earlier, one of the biggest cost is the request for funds for the myriad of wind down activities that the organization will have to undertake to ensure that everything is in place to manage our awards through the 23-24 fiscal year. And that includes the leave buyout costs that we will have to pay. And then during the 2021 fiscal year, we do anticipate that we will have an increase in our facilities costs, which is a part of the increases contained in the lease that we signed back in 2015. We do have some contingency funds in the 2021 budget. First of all, because we have such a small legal staff, we have included some contingency funds for legal should Ben need to secure some specialized legal services that we don't have in-house. And with the wind down activities, that is very possible. And finally, if we should have recovered funds, we have included contingency funds for some reviews. Now, if the recovered funds, if additional recovered funds do not materialize, neither will the reviews, and these funds will not be used. So I know that Dr. Milan went over this briefly, but I'd like to cover it as well. And so this is the funds, operational funds that are available for us to meet our responsibilities through the 23-24 fiscal year. So at the beginning of July 2019, so at the beginning of this fiscal year, we had just under $43 million of funds available for operations. We anticipate that Our expenses for the 1920 fiscal year will be at about $13.7, $13.8 million. Our budget request for 2021 is $12.3 million. And this leaves us $16.6 million available to carry us from the 21-22 fiscal year through the 23-24 fiscal year. And we believe that this funding is sufficient to cover our operations through that time frame. So this concludes the presentation. We request your support of the 2021 proposed budget. As I indicated earlier, you should have received an appendix with your package that provides you with the budget details for each of our cost centers. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, and I want to thank you again for the opportunity to present this budget.
Sheila, this is JT. Thank you very much, as always, for the highly professional presentation. In connection with this measure, or this topic, I wanted to turn it over at this point to Mr. Julesgaard, who will lead the discussion of any motions to adopt in his capacity as chairman of the Finance Subcommittee. Mr. Julesgaard.
Thank you, Chairman Thomas. So the Finance Subcommittee met on June the 8th to review this presentation that Sheila just made. And at the end of that, the Finance Committee approved bringing this budget to the full ICOC, which is what just happened. So with that, I would entertain any motion to approve this budget.
So moved.
Seconded by Al Roulette.
Okay. So we have the motion. We have a second to approve this budget. Any questions or comments? Any questions for Sheila or comments generally about the budget?
Yes, I just wanted to comment, first of all, on your leadership, Steve, and the membership of the Finance Subcommittee. This is not an easy task, especially as we're dealing with a wind-up situation, and hopefully the voters will give us another scheduled reappointment and refunding in November 3rd, 2020. But I want to thank Sheila and Maria and the staff. Sheila, we're going to be missing you, I guess. You're leaving state service after how many years?
45 years.
You look terrific. She started at the age of 10 with the department.
I wish.
But I just want to say,
I did start young. Young.
We're very lucky to have Sheila and the staff, as well as the Finance Subcommittee, working so hard on this issue. And it's not been without tremendous challenges. So I just want to say thank you publicly to you, Sheila, to Maria,
thank you,
Steve, and the members of the Finance Subcommittee, because this has been a very challenging episode in our history. And God willing, we will be refunded and we'll help get up to speed and continue to help and serve patients.
Thank you very much, Art. And let me just echo what you just said about Sheila's efforts in all of this. It's really been amazing to me, the strides that we've made since I first joined the board and became involved with the Finance Subcommittee. So the level of professionalism with which she approaches this is something really to be applauded. And I thank her very much. Thank you, Sheila. I know we've worked a lot together, and it's been a very great experience for me. Are there
Thank you, Steve. I want to thank you for your leadership as well. And then I want to thank the finance, the CIRM finance team, because and the leadership team, because really without them, it would be pretty difficult to put this budget together. But they always step up and do the right thing and help me with putting the budget together. And so, you know, it really does take a team to make it happen. And so thank you again for all your support throughout these years.
Are there any other comments or questions?
Francisco had a question.
Yes. I'd also like to echo those comments. Sheila, I think we've been extraordinarily lucky to have you. One of the things I'll miss about CIRM, I did have a question though. If the figures, if the agency is forced to wind down, what happens if the numbers don't exactly zero out at the end of the day? If there's a can there be an unfunded liability, or what if there is a surplus?
Well, there can't be an unfunded liability because the state won't allow that. But I guess if there was a surplus, it would just go back to the general fund.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions or comments? Joe, did you have one? I don't know, your name just popped up on my screen. Are there any questions or comments from the public? Maria, I take it there are none that you see?
I don't see any.
All right, then let's move forward with the vote then, Maria.
George Blumenthal,
Yes.
Ken Burtis,
Yes.
Anne Marie Dulage,
Yes.
Isabel Duron,
Yes.
Judy Gasson,
Yes.
David Higgins,
Yes.
Steve Julesgaard,
Yes.
Dave Martin,
Yes.
Shlomo Malmed,
Yes.
Lauren Miller,
Yes.
Adriana Padilla,
Yes.
Joe Panetta,
Yes.
Francisco Prieto,
Aye.
Robert Quint. Dr. Quint, are you on mute?
Yes.
Thank you. Al Rolette,
Yes.
Suzanne Sandmeyer,
Yes.
Jeff Sheehy,
Yes.
Oz Stewart,
Yes.
Jonathan Thomas,
Yes.
Art Torres,
Aye.
Christina Vori,
Yes.
Diane Winokur. Diane, you may be on mute. Keith Yamamoto.
Yes.
Diane, I'm going to try you one more time. Okay, motion carries.
Thank you, Bria, and thank you, Dr. Milan and Sheila, for two great presentations setting the stage for the last two votes. And thank you as well to Mr. Julesgaard for his august leadership of the Finance Subcommittee and to all members of the subcommittee for their fine work. Moving on to the next topic, it's now the Application Review Subcommittee, consideration of applications submitted in response to the special call for COVID-19 projects. At this point, I'd like to turn the meeting over to Mr.
Thank you, Chairman Thomas. Dr. Zambrano, do you have a present? Oh, before I start, Ms. Duran, did you have, I know that you wanted to speak. Do you want to speak now or after the voting? Whatever your preference is.
If Gil can make his presentations, then I would like to speak.
That's perfect. Thank you. So Dr. Zambrano?
Hi, thank you, everyone. So I want to present to you the recommendations from the GWG regarding the latest fifth cycle of the COVID-19 program. So for this particular cycle, we have now added the Discovery 1 or DISC 1 opportunity. So this is the first one where applications were received and reviewed under that program. The next slide, please. Again, this is a reminder of the different types of opportunities that are available. We have now included the DISC 1 through clinical trial opportunities and the respective amounts. This is also the first cycle where the DISC 2 opportunity now has an allowed award amount of $250,000. Next slide, please. And then just for the DISC 1, this kind of program is one of the very earliest discovery opportunities. And so what we're looking for here are great new ideas. The expectation here is that folks will not necessarily have preliminary data, but have either a mechanistic or other type of idea that they can work on. And what we're asking them to do within 6 months is to have data to confirm or reject whatever hypothesis they propose. So next slide, please. All right, so one of the other things I want to address is the needs of the underserved is something that has come up both in discussion here and at the GWG. So as we all know, especially for COVID-19, there is a disproportionate impact on minority and underserved communities in California and across the country. And so what we have done thus far in the previous cycle and in this cycle, we had included in the CLIN2 project, so anybody who's proposing a clinical trial, we've required that the applicants include a plan for outreach and inclusion of minority and underserved populations in their studies. And in addition, for this latest cycle, we implemented on a trial basis an additional request. So this was done over about a week's time. And so we asked all other applicants to tell us how their overall study plan and design has considered that disproportional impact of COVID-19 on these communities and populations, and to tell us a little more about what limitations there may be, what advantages or challenges they may face in having their study develop a product or a tool that would serve those populations. So in that, I think given the very quick turnaround and short notice, applicants were all responsive. They all provided language that allowed us to supplement and append to their application. The GWG was also very responsive and appreciative of having that included in the application. All right, so in looking then at the final recommendations that were made for this cycle, there were 3 applications that were recommended for funding, including 1 clinical trial application. And so the total applicant request is about 1.1 million. As stated before, we have about 2 million remaining in the fund, which is adequate to cover those 3 recommended. And so the 3 are shown on the next slide. And so the first project is a clinical trial, which is a cell therapy approach. So these are placental hematopoietic stem cell derived natural killer cells that are intended to treat adults with COVID-19. The application scored an 85 and request 750,000. This was a resubmission of one that was considered before and is now recommended. The next one is a vaccine development discovery program. This particular one is a supplement. So you may recall that we discussed this one because it was focused on developing a unique vaccine mechanism, but was utilizing only one HLA type. So this supplement was to broaden the HLA types that are included, particularly to address and include African American and Latino communities within the study perspective. And then the last application is also a discovery application for a cell therapy. This is a chimeric antigen receptor targeting the spike glycoprotein of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. This application scored a 90 and requests about 250,000 for conducting that study. So that concludes my presentation, Mr. Sheehy.
Thank you, Dr. Sembrano. Mr. Ron?
Thank you, Mr. Sheehy. I really appreciate this opportunity. This sort of, to some extent, even goes back to what Suzanne talked about in terms of public education and how important CIRM has been in doing that. I was looking at the reviewers' comments, and I note, first of all, congratulations to them. They are a very smart bunch when it comes to reviewing the science. I was also pleased to see that some included in their review notes comments about the potential for inclusion and impact on communities of color in California, who, as Gil mentioned, by the numbers suffer the highest levels of COVID death and infection. Potential is not good. As an organization, I believe that we are obligated to call out exclusion wherever we see it in science. So the other day I heard Janet Napolitano, the current president of the UC, say that they dusted off Prop 209, trying to get rid of its anti-discriminatory intent. And it was determined that it was discriminatory of UC to give special preference to a proportion of applicants based on race or ethnicity. One caller to the NPR program said that proportionality was a quota system. Opponents call it equity. I remember asking the board to consider that all of our requests from discovery, et cetera, be inclusive and demonstrate proportionality. To me, that's great science resulting in good medicine. COVID does not seek proportionality. It is not democratic. COVID is an opportunistic invader looking for the most vulnerable victims, who in this case happen to be Black, Brown, and Native American. So science to me must be smart, but it also must be just. When I go back to the community, and I have been talking to the community over these last 5 or 6 months in virtual conversations around the country about testing and vaccination, and they need to hear that they were not only the victim, but that they were part of the solution. Because already there's pushback on testing. We've heard in some Latino communities that they're testing us because they're trying to give us the infection. I asked a young African-American college student if he would be vaccinated, and his instant response was, "I do not want to be anybody's lab rat." So if we want uptake in our most severely impacted communities to reach the level of saturation that we must get in order to make all of our communities safe, then we, the patient advocates, must be armed with the arguments that can waylay the myth, the misinformation, and the mistrust. That means we can say that proportionate or equal members of African-American, Latino, Native, and Asian communities took part in clinical trials and in other research to test the drugs or the methods, and there were minimal adverse effects or there were great results. We know no drug is perfect for everybody. We know in early stages or at all stages, these various drugs and treatments might have some negative consequences. But as patient and community advocates, we need to be able to provide smart science and overwhelming reasons for treatment and vaccination, or at least be sure that our communities make decisions based on informed consent. I heard the other day that one of the plasma trials was doing very well, and that many of the COVID patients had done quite well on the treatment, but they didn't tell me who those patients were. So I don't know if in fact Latino, African-American, Native Americans did well on these trials. And so we need to know this information so our communities can know this information. So I will continue to call for all RFPs to describe inclusion plans that they're not about the potential, but specific goals to recruit our communities, that they point to assigned goals and plans in the proposal, not quotas, but inclusion, and that the results be added to the review summary. And finally, that when we go to our communities, we can say with a great deal of, I want to say pride, maybe it isn't pride, but I want our communities to know that in fact they were included and they were engaged, and that the results are based on all of our communities and they can trust the science. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ron, for your
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Senator Torres.
Yes, thank you. Again, I want to thank your leadership in the past, and obviously Isabel's leadership now We mentioned during our grant reviews a few weeks ago and last week as well, that this language was important to the board. Although this is a temporary proposal, this needs to go to your committee, Chairman Sheehy, and hopefully Isabel will agree to serve on the science subcommittee, and then come forward with a more formal proposal that the board fully can adopt, so that we go through our own process, it's transparent, and come up with language that will be formidable and enforceable because it has received the imprimatur of our science subcommittee and our full board. So I know that you will take up that charge quickly, and then I know that the science subcommittee will get back to us with both your input, leadership, as well as Isabel, so that we can formally adopt this language. Yesterday, we adopted a $440 million budget for Covered California, which also included the Navigator program, because we felt that it was important to reach out to African American and Latino communities to make sure they are enrolled in Obamacare, ACA in California in order to receive COVID-19 patients. We've been very, very happy to see that over 500,000 new enrollees in the last 2 months have come to Covered California for help because they've lost their jobs, lost their health care. And now that's a refuge in terms of getting access to care, which now can approach, already have spent in California, $2.4 billion for COVID-19 care, and will probably exceed 6 times what we spent on the flu, to almost $24 billion once this crisis, God willing, is over. So thank you again, Jeff, for your leadership. Thank you, Isabel, and we look forward to hearing your formal proposal to the subcommittee and then to the full board.
Thank you, Senator Torres. If there's no other board comments,
Anne Marie has her hand raised.
oh,
Jeff.
sure. Yes, Dr. Duliege.
Isabel, thank you again for your proposal. And I, like I'm sure many others, certainly applaud this initiative. In fact, over the years, as you probably know, the FDA has requested, when any group, usually companies, seek approval of a drug or a vaccine, to show effectively results in minorities, such as you described. So this is very much aligned with the general trend that is more than healthy. Are you suggesting that, in fact, we would only provide approval, support, financial support, to grant requests that have such plans? Is that what, in practice, your proposal is about?
Thanks for asking, Anna Marie. I'm not trying to be exclusionary either, but I do believe that we've reached a stage of the numbers of communities of color, racial and ethnic minorities in this country, that the research really impacts the kind of medicine that is done. And if we don't have adequate numbers of these communities in our testing and in our trials and as part of the research, then we're not going to get medicine necessarily that works and treatments that work for all. So I would propose that it won't exclude people, but it will certainly make, as far as I'm concerned, make researchers not just check the box that they're going to include minorities, but that they actually show how they're going to do that. And that as a result, and I think we'd already started moving in this direction, Jeff, as that a result, as the reviewers look at that, it does push them to the top of the food chain, so that they begin to understand that this is truly important to medicine and to the health of all of our communities, and not just, just trying to demand something that to me should be not just a potential, but should be a norm. It should be a norm, and not an extra special quota. So I would hope that we would consider that we would perhaps assign it some extra points because it's good science, but it's also good for medicine and good for the public. And I would, of course, obviously love to hear other people's ways of that being written, so that it's not meant to be exclusionary, but that it is meant to applaud those scientists who recognize how important this issue is.
Thank you for the clarification. I agree.
And just to add, and again, I am so grateful for Mr. Ron's leadership. Just in this last review, we heard about gold standards and silver standards for recruiting diverse populations for clinical trials. And that had never come up in a CIRM review before. And obviously that will be integrated into the policies that we develop going forward. I also note that we have an application before us that is added, that is a supplement to an existing approved award, and that application is to create a tool that allows researchers to test vaccines on more diverse HLA types that are more representative of the population. And it was so interesting in the context of this, the discussion at the grants working group, to hear people say that this tool doesn't really exist, that people have this tool that is predominantly Western European that's on the shelf that they just pick up and use because it's there, available, and easy. And just momentum from Mrs. Duran's initiative is actually creating, for a relatively low amount of money, a tool that will allow vaccine developers to easily address a much broader population. It's just kind of stunning how little thought and energy has been put into this, and how little it takes for us to exert real leadership here. So again, I just want to applaud the initiative that Mr. Ron has driven forward, and just to note that it's not about good science or bad science or being exclusionary. It's really about being inclusionary and being intentional, and that this is really a great thing for CIRM to take leadership on moving forward. So are there any other comments from other board members, or should we go into the applications now? I don't see any hands. So the first motion I will take will be a motion to not fund the applications that did not score in the fundable range. Is there a motion for that?
I make this motion.
Thank you, Dr. Duliesh. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any board discussion on this? Any public comment?
If members of the public would like to speak, please dial *9.
Seeing none, could we call the roll, please?
Oh, just a question.
Sure, Senator Torres.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure, are we letting the neurological condition project, research project, go back to improve itself? Because there have been recent data suggesting that COVID-19 is in fact affecting the brain. And I just wanted to make sure if Gilbert can answer that. Is there a potential for improvement, or are we just done?
So all projects that don't succeed in any cycle are free to reapply.
Okay.
I think so. Yes, they can certainly come in.
Thank you, Chairman Sheehy.
Thank you. So, Ms. Bonneville, do we vote? Yes. Call the roll, please. Thank you.
Anne-Marie Dulege.
Yes.
Isabel Duron.
Yes.
David Higgins.
Yes.
Steve Julesgaard.
Yes.
Dave Martin.
Yes.
Lauren Miller.
Yes.
Adriana Padilla.
Yes.
Joe Panetta.
Yes.
Robert Quint.
Yes.
Al Rolette.
Yes.
Jeff Sheehy.
Yes.
Oz Stewart.
Yes.
Thank you. Jonathan Thomas.
Yes.
Art Torres.
Aye.
Diane Winokur. The motion carries.
Thank you. Next, I will accept a motion to either fund all three applications in the fundable range, or we can take them separately. It's up to whoever makes the motion.
I move to approve all three.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any board discussion? Any public comment? Seeing none.
This is Dave. I have a technical question, Jeff.
Sure.
On 12016, my concern, I know this field a bit, but my concern is that a car NK cell is going to kill a cell that has on its surface the CoV-2 spike. It's not going to damage whatsoever the CoV-2 virus itself. And I just wonder whether there was full cognizant of the risk to, just for example, the pulmonary alveolar cells or the pulmonary macrophages, the type 2. Was that assessed by the review group or discussed by the applicant?
So, Dr. Martin, I don't believe that was specifically discussed. I don't recall that being specifically addressed in the application either.
I worry about the toxicity of such a car NK cell. They're potent if they're directed, and they see. I mean, if they see a spike, they'll bind to it, but they can't kill the virus, and they probably won't even bind it up because they're going to be completely overwhelmed by the number of free viruses. But they will certainly kill a cell that's expressing a reasonable density of surface spikes. Was there any model that was described here?
So they would be doing in vitro studies to look at the efficacy of the NK CAR cells, and they would also be doing in vivo studies. So in their in vivo murine model, they would be, obviously looking broadly when introduced into tissue, how broadly it would impact. And so again, this is also an early discovery stage, right? So they're still just doing proof of concept.
Okay. I mean, obviously that's critical. I'm just a little skeptic, but not by any means against it.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. Is there additional discussion? Public comment? Seeing none, Ms. Bonneville, could you call the roll, please?
Yes. Anne-Marie Dulage,
Yes.
Isabel Duron,
Yes.
David Higgins,
Yes.
Steve Julesgaard,
Yes.
Dave Martin,
Yes.
Lauren Miller,
Yes.
Adriana Padilla,
Yes.
Joe Panetta,
Yes.
Francisco Prieto,
Aye.
Robert Quint,
Yes.
Al Rolette,
Yes.
Jeff Sheehy,
Yes.
Oz Stewart,
Yes.
Jonathan Thomas,
Yes.
Art Torres,
Aye.
Diane Winokur, Francisco,
Yes, I was just going to say, except for those with which I may have a conflict.
thank you so much. The motion carries.
Thank you, Ms. Bonneville. Chairman Thomas, that concludes the business of the Application Review Subcommittee.
Thank you, Mr. Sheehy, and thank you very much for your continued expert stewardship of the Application Review Subcommittee, and to all members of the Application Review Subcommittee who've done not just great work over the years, but have worked tirelessly overtime in the last couple of months to accommodate these bi-weekly COVID round considerations. So Chairman Sheehy and the rest of the application review subcommittee, thank you very much. And we have our 14th award now, and we will have undoubtedly more to come. So thank you. That concludes the action items. We're now moving on to, there's one on the agenda under action item, which is actually properly a discussion item, which is discussion of strategic concepts. That conversation will be led by Dr. Milan.
Thank you, Chairman Thomas, members of the board, members of the public, and CIRM colleagues. Nice to be with you again. Just to take a step back and reflecting on some of the comments earlier, CIRM was formed in 2004 by the citizens of California as a first in kind, and I've called it before, special purpose funding vehicle to support groundbreaking medical research in stem cell regenerative medicine and also vital research opportunities. With the mission to advance treatments and cures for untreatable and devastating medical conditions, CIRM has been a leader in growing this field and has funded over 1,000 scientific programs. I believe the number is 1,030 at this point. Many programs that otherwise would have languished have now made their way to the clinics in clinical trials, and a number have begun to demonstrate benefit and even cures. While some of those on the board and a few CIRM team members here today have been with the agency from the beginning, I have been here for just the past 7 years. And in that time frame, I have witnessed firsthand the power of this special purpose funding vehicle. Outfitted with a 2.0 funding engine by my predecessor and our past president Mills 5 years ago, we've been able to expand the number of CIRM-funded clinical trials nearly almost fourfold in 5 years. And as mentioned just a few weeks ago, while we were going into lockdown mode, in response to the COVID crisis, we were able to rapidly deploy our systems and create a special funding opportunity to tap into our reserve of scientific talent and innovation in California and to join in the global effort to combat this pandemic. If funded beyond 2020, CIRM will be well positioned to continue its important mission. But we are in a watershed moment in regenerative medicine, surrounded by marked advancements in all of the associated fields, genomics, bioinformatics, computational medicine. And today, I'll be presenting some topics for board discussion and input regarding what CIRM would be able to do potentially beyond 2020. Next slide, please, Doug. So in the past, even just 2 years, we've had the benefit of gaining really important input that adds to the CIRM's 14-year experience of being involved in reviews of 3,000 grants and managing over 1,000 awards. We've served on academic and industry leadership forums, attended meetings, presented at these meetings, spoke to the leaders in the fields and policy, industry, and science, and are continually engaged with the community, academic, business communities, as well as have the benefit of the leadership and input of our board and expert advisors. And with all this, the CIRM team has been undergoing a process of compiling all of these data sets and information in a way that we can organize some of these topic areas for the board to have discussions on them and to provide direction so that we may craft some potential strategic concepts. And I'm proposing here a framework. In February of 2020, we introduced some strategic themes based on this input. The 4 strategic themes are to advance world-class science, which is what we do, but there will be some kind of more details about how we could do that in the future. Build pathways to commercialization, increase patient access to innovative treatments, maximize our impact through continued refinements in operational excellence. And today, June 2020, the topics that will be brought to this board for discussion and input to our team so that we can help you to do a deep dive along with external experts, patient advocates, and key opinion leaders to inform a draft outline for a strategic plan that can be brought back in the fourth quarter of this year, so that if the November 2020 ballot initiative goes through, that we will be in a position where we can potentially bring a draft strategic plan to the board in the first quarter of 2021. In the same spirit as I presented a transition wind down plan, optimizing the activities of staff and deriving from the institutional knowledge and expertise of the staff, including our valued retired annuitants. We are also doing the same thing in terms of gathering and actively working through various different types of scenarios, assumption testing, gathering information to bring to the board. And this will, we believe, tee us up to have a rather healthy starting point in the first quarter of 2021 for the board to consider, further develop, and potentially then adopt a strategic plan, at least a portion of which can be executed within the first year of launching the new funding for CIRM. Next slide, please. I've shown this slide before. We set a very high bar, and we were able to accomplish the goals set forth in the current strategic plan. Next slide, please. And just by that, and I should mention, because the current strategic plan has measurable outcomes, we are able to tell how we're doing on that. And by accomplishing these, it does give us an idea of CIRM's value proposition and where we are today. So starting from that, looking forward to beyond 2020, we would like to go through an exercise with the board today of discussing where we want to be and how do we get there. So where are we today? With a mission to accelerate stem cell treatments to patients with unmet medical needs, CIRM has demonstrated that the proven acceleration-based funding partnership works. We've built a robust portfolio of over 1,000 programs. After today, 64 clinical trials have been funded at this program, supporting a diverse technology platform and innovative approaches, and de-risking promising science, leading, I think Dr. Martin had mentioned, supporting them through the valley of death, getting them well-positioned so they have the data and the information that supports industry partnership. And we have now received $8.7 billion in industry support for our programs. This is something that has been increasing by the year and has really, truly broken through the past 3 years.
I'm on Zoom.
We've been able to enact the evolving regulatory paradigm as outlined in the progress towards strategic goals, and we have been part of the regulatory paradigm shaping. CIRM has funded specialized infrastructure, including the Alpha Clinics Network, the Genomics Data Hub, and is known for its skills and resources toward uniquely supporting translational research, something that is not readily supported by organizations such as the NIH. And we've seeded a new field where even the starting points for the education and training programs have seeded the field in various sectors in science, in industry and academia and graduate schools. And with the patient and community advocate leadership that we have heard about and have seen in action on this board and on our advisory panels, this has shaped the agency, and there's much more that we can do. Next slide, please. Where do we want to be? The mission to accelerate development of innovative regenerative approaches to deliver effective treatments and cures is a strong one, it's a relevant one, and it'll be relevant beyond 2020. We hope that we'll have the good problem of not having that to have that mission, but that is something that is going to be relevant for the foreseeable future. In addition, we'd like to be able to expand therapeutic delivery and equitable access to patients with unmet medical needs. And that'll be something that we will dig a little bit deeper in later on in this presentation. And by the way, I'm doing this as a presentation for now, but soon we'll be shifting it over to discussion. And thirdly, we propose that partnering with key stakeholders and structuring our internal operations that are compatible with these other goals will help to further augment the impact of these programs. Next slide, please. And how do we get there? We have a demonstrated value proposition, and we would like to put that to work, to leverage that, to take this acceleration-based funding model and to increase the impact of each project that is funded. So we have incredible science we funded, but often it'll bring forward that particular program, that particular group of investigators, but sometimes it's lost, and then the whole group of programs that are in related projects that CIRM has funded may not benefit from this. We'd like to be able to change that. Provide built-in knowledge capture, and is a discussion point on the next slide. Incorporate new paradigms, including vital research opportunities, which this board has already done with gene therapy programs, and discussion of how we can best incorporate and anticipate future vital research opportunities. Design programs so that success in any given project progresses the overall CIRM pipeline and that line of research. Formalize strategic alliances and partnerships to enhance our impact, and leverage CIRM's role in de-risking projects and in attracting industry investment to create new commercialization pathways, not really new commercialization pathways, but ease the way to getting to commercialization through creation of new programs. And this would increase the post-approval success of the CIRM portfolio. And partner with and empower community stakeholders to optimize access to novel investigative and approved therapies. And that's something that'll be discussed in more detail in the upcoming slides. Next slide, please. So now this gets us to our discussion portion of this presentation. The strategic themes in service of the mission to accelerate effective treatments and cures to patients are advancing world-class science, build pathways to commercialization, increase patient access to innovative treatments, and maximize impact through operational excellence. We've organized our team so we can internally do homework along each of these themes, and through an iterative process, come up with potential broad concepts for the board to consider and discuss and provide us with input. So to start off, next slide, please, is the first theme of advancing world-class science. We believe that the 5 pillars are strong: discovery, translational, clinical, education, infrastructure. And these are strong pillars and a basis to build upon. A second concept is the idea of data sharing and data access, which would be built into the funding model. And then the third idea that will be a little bit clearer once we give some examples is the idea of lateral integration of the pillars in addition to vertical integration of funding opportunities. Vertical integration, to just give it an example of what that means, is what we already do when we have this continuous funding model that was launched under the 2.0 engine, where success with readiness for a translational program, and then translational program would give rise to IND enabling to clinical trials and so forth. And so that is kind of a product that CIRM has really refined, and it's an excellent base to start from. But in addition, the idea of lateral integration is that programs in distinct pillars would have a relationship with the other pillars and advance the programs because of this relationship. So to give a very kind of concrete example, for instance, one of the programs we're going to talk about is our education programs to develop the workforce of tomorrow. there is a need for manufacturing expertise. That is a key bottleneck and a key need for the field. And while we launch such a program, this could be integrated into the programs such as our translational program, tech transfer programs, and some of the manufacturing partnerships that I will describe in the commercialization part of this discussion. The idea of proactive quality by design, which is a terminology used for product development, but could actually be used that we actually follow this also with our funding programs. If we embed this into how we empower our programs, we have a best chance of making them development ready should they succeed in moving down the vertically integrated pathway, so that they are better positioned from the regulatory perspective. They're more ready for tech transfer, and we de-risk manufacturing scale up and commercialization. How can that be done? An example is, for instance, some of the future products will likely involve pluripotent stem cells, such as induced pluripotent stem cell lines that some of our programs have already been working on. And if one could envision a core resource where these lines are characterized and may not be GMP yet, but suitable for research and early development, and it's something that's accessible, that could be used by different programs, because the starting material doesn't matter. It's what you do with it to reprogram or modify it or gene-modify it. Then what would happen is that you could continue to build upon that data set so you know that line better. The FDA loves that idea. And then the other aspect of this is, as those lines are then used moving along from the DISC-TRAN-CLIN pathway, that the data, information, and experience at each stage could be captured, and it can inform other programs that are also using these lines. Next slide, please. And so here are the discussion topics. So how do we do all these things? They seem like good ideas. They seem in some ways abstract, but concretely, how could we impact them? So we, as you know, we're a funding agency. So potentially what we could do is create funded programs such as those listed here. So for shared resources and novel technologies, that would accelerate the science while continually allowing validation of these particular resources and technologies. The idea would be to create a built-in collaboration and access to CIRM programs that are funded. I'd like to start off with this concept of a technology exchange network, which is almost like a next generation of the core labs. The idea behind the core labs in the early stages of CIRM is that it's still relevant today, but especially in the early days, there was a lot of challenges in being able to culture embryonic stem cells or stem cells in the lab, as well as some aspects of characterizing them and evaluating their differentiation status, markers, everything involved in that. And so specialized core labs in the various institutions was able to provide that to junior investigators, as well as other investigators and collaborative investigators. So taking that concept, and let's say, in addition to that type of support, you had even more specialized techniques, such as some of the things we've heard about at the ICOC meeting, which is currently in progress right now, such as evaluating mechanistic studies and characterization with very complex systems, such as sequencing when you perturb the genomic sequence or things like that. Somebody else has figured it out. It's not necessarily something that they need to hold secret, for instance, because it's something that can be shared. If that particular technology is something that's accessible to the CIRM programs that are testing other models and other questions, what would happen is that they'd be able to use that technology that could advance their research. And meanwhile, the original technology developer would have even more information, validation, and reproducibility potentially of the system that they are developing. In addition to the technology exchange network, and then I'll stop for comments, is the idea of knowledge networks and data sharing. Not only is this a good idea, but this is a topic where everybody is moving, because many of you have heard the topic, data is a new oil. It is extremely valuable. The problem is being able to get the data in a way that you have the most complete and robust data sets, that it's something that's coordinated and standardized so that it's something that can be subject to analysis, such as with machine learning and AI, and that we are able to integrate interoperable systems, because there are many, many, many different organizations that are involved in various data sets. It's not the idea that CIRM would create this huge machinery itself. It's the idea that CIRM would intelligently design our programs and create a way that our investigators are putting their data in the right format in the right place, and that would increase their chances of making the most of their research, as well as adding to the body and the power of the data sets. And an example of something that is the starting point for this is that we have funded a genomics program that created the Stem Cell Data Hub at UC Santa Cruz. And through this data hub, the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative and CIRM are in the final phases of securing an MOU so that CIRM programs, particularly in the COVID program announcements, could have access to the genomics tools and informatics that are available, first wrangled or processed at UC Santa Cruz, and then also then exported to the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative funded programs. And in this way, all of the parties and our investigators would have access to very powerful aggregate data sets and tools. I'm gonna just stop there so that, because there's a lot there, and I wanted to open it up, if that's okay, to get some input and comments from the board. Art Torres, Senator Torres.
Yes. Yes, thank you very much, Maria. Our challenge has always been to how do we increase the potential for new stem cell scientists and also provide diversity, which is why the Bridges program was created, and very successfully so. And then when I helped start the Sparks program for high school students, another opportunity to increase diversity and bring in young people for future stem cell scientists. The other aspect that we're working on, in 2014, the legislature passed legislation to allow community colleges, about 15 statewide, to establish a 4-year baccalaureate degree in various degrees. 2 of those community colleges, Solano, which is near us in the Bay Area in Vacaville, and Miracosta, which is basically in San Diego, in partnership with Genentech, ALSA, Chiron, IDEC, ALSA Pharmaceuticals, to create a 4-year biotechnology, biomanufacturing degree. Far less expensive at $10,500 for the 4 years as opposed to a 4-year institution. But that partnership is going to be important to us, which blends into what you've been promoting here, and that is how do we ensure accessibility to biomanufacturing, biotechnology in a different sphere. And I think the community colleges may hold the key to that. They're also going to be increasing in population simply because students will not be willing to pay the tuition at UC, because all they will be doing is getting online classes. So it'll be less expensive to go to a community college to get their general education requirements out of the way. And I'm talking about 1st and 2nd year students, but this also opens opportunities for us for more strategic partnerships with community colleges, especially these 2 that are offering biomanufacturing degrees.
Thank you, Senator Torres.
Maria, first of all, congratulations. This is a product of a lot of thinking on your part, and congratulations on involving so many stakeholders in bringing a comprehensive roadmap for us to consider. I think this is a very, very helpful slide, and I would offer three examples on the slide where your concept of consortium which we are so uniquely poised in California to pull off, can be applied. The first is in your comment about core services to provide prepared cells, induced pluripotent stem cells, for example. I think that having a chain of CIRM affiliated, CIRM funded, CIRM blessed quality core services to provide industrial scale induced pluripotent stem cells for order by investigators and by industry is an excellent idea, and we have the wherewithal to pull that off in California in different sites across the state. And the second concept which I'd like us to consider is in terms of clinical trials. I think that the nomenclature which you've used here is excellent. Phase 4 trials. I think we in California are uniquely poised to develop for the country a model of a registry of all patients who have ever undergone a clinical trial with a stem cell. We already have 50 or more patients who are or have been through trials. And yet, to my knowledge, none of them have robust, scientifically validated follow-ups. So we don't know scientifically what happened to patients who may have received stem cell infusions 3, 4, 5 years ago. And I think that CIRM could be poised to be even a global leader in developing a registry open to everyone, and that we would even speak to FDA that anybody who does a phase 3 clinical trial and completes that trial successfully would be forced by the FDA to enter all their patients into phase 4 follow-up, which can be blessed and vetted and the quality assured by CIRM. And we are uniquely poised to provide that platform for a stem cell registry post phase 3. And in the final comment I would consider on the slide, which I think is a very unique opportunity for us, is in terms of clinical training. I think we should be the ones to speak to the Accreditation Council for Graduate Medical Education to establish clinical fellowships, accredited clinical fellowships in regenerative medicine, where we can marry our translational research, our clinical trials, and our clinical capacity in California to form a syllabus and a curriculum and an accreditation oversight for an established clinical fellowship in regenerative medicine. I think this will be very well received. We will have applicants from all over the world who want to come and train in our centers, and we could offer them a full certification and accreditation program. So those are just 3 examples, I think, which fit into your notion of consortium, of streamlining transversely all of our talents and strengths in California, which have been built on the CIRM platform. So thank you again for bringing this to our consideration.
Thank you very much.
Keith had a question or a comment.
Yes, great, thank you. Maria, thank you for this presentation. This is, I know you're not finished yet, but I also want to underscore the importance of this slide and all of the thinking that has gone behind it. And while I agree with the previous comment, I want to focus on yet a 4th component of this slide, which is the knowledge networks and data sharing. We all know that our capacity to collect data, to collect information and collect data about all manner of biological processes has expanded just enormously in the past decade during the lifetime of CIRM. The expansion has been astonishing. Everyone in society is overwhelmed with data, overwhelmed with information, and we're reaching a stage where people are sort of giving up. They're just sort of saying, don't tell me anything more. I can't think about the stuff you've already told me. That's true. And so the whole concept of knowledge networks and data sharing is to say that we need to be able to use the information that we're collecting, and using it means being able to put it on a common platform, put lots of different data types on a common platform, and be able to subject them to the learning algorithms that high-end computation allows us to do with machine learning and artificial intelligence. And so there can't be a more important moment for CIRM to be recognizing this imperative and carrying out and extending projects and partnerships that allow it to move forward. So what I know is now under consideration of expanding this collaboration with UC Santa Cruz and reaching it into CCI, I think is interesting, because it's really a pilot project for looking for single cell analyses of the COVID award data. In many ways, this is one of the few happy outcomes that we can extract from the COVID crisis that we're all in, is that this opportunity has presented itself. I think that for CIRM to be able to take advantage of it and leverage the information that is being collected, all of the powerful information that's being collected in the CIRM context, to be able to join it with all of the analytical power looking at different data types that is moving into the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, exploiting the incredible genomics network that has been developed by David Hustler at UC Santa Cruz. I think it's a fantastic opportunity, and I'm really glad to see the foresight of CIRM, seeing that that all of the things that these three powerful entities are carrying out can be leveraged by bringing them together into a powerful partnership. So I really want to speak in favor of that component. I think there's lots of wisdom on this slide, but this one I think can be particularly impactful.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Yes, I just want to thank you, Keith, for working with my alma mater at UC Santa Cruz, because it was that genomics department that really has excelled. And when we built that stem cell lab early on, it was just really momentous for us to see yet another building emerging from the Redwoods, but also thanks to George Blumenthal, because of his leadership when he was chancellor at Santa Cruz and continues to be. And now with Chancellor Reeve, who's taken on the mantle to support the efforts. But most of all, thank you for the work that you're doing there. And I know it'll be very successful with your involvement. And I know JT has been part of that as well. Thank you.
Maria, Isabel has her hand raised.
Okay.
Or Chairman Thomas.
I'm sorry, Maria.
Isabel has her hand raised.
Isabel?
Yes, Isabel.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you, Maria. I appreciate looking at this. I did want to say I got a chuckle out of one of Dr. Yamamoto's comments related to folks are inundated with so much information. And the concern is, of course, that they stop listening. Part of my concern is that they're not hearing what they need to hear, and particularly in communities of color who are challenged with just trying to get some basic information. So I really appreciate some of the efforts you're making around education and training to include community educators and patient navigators, because we think of them somewhat interchangeably, how we utilize them in the systems in the Latino community. I think it's crucial that complicated science needs to have some simple conversations. And I think it's really imperative that we can bring forward our community educators from all of our underserved communities so that they can help translate complex science into something in which our communities understand and can say, yes, okay, I get it, and I can engage, and I appreciate it, and I'll hold my hand up to engage in clinical trials. But I think that the complexity of all of this science is what in some ways puts off many members of our communities. And I'm glad that you are looking at an education component. I would also, I know stem cells and some of this science is super complex, and sometimes getting it down to its basics can be a challenge in and of themselves. But I would hope that in looking at training and certification, you rethink levels of training and do not exclude some members of our community who perhaps don't reach the certification level, but perhaps can be educated and trained and utilized, because to me, they are some of our most important links between communities and complex science. So as you think about certification, let's be sure we're not shutting out the opportunity for some people to become some of our best field workers, if you. Thank you.
Absolutely. And that is actually something that's being addressed in the theme 3, which is patient access, is the idea of not only should the training and certification be informed by the information we gain through registry, but you'll see that that they should be for the community, by the community, so that it's being delivered by their own. And so that's something that would be in terms of multiple levels of training and education, and public education. That is something that we would hope to be able to, embed into the overall plan.
Maria, I'd just like to make one quick comment. In addition to discussing these concepts to inform the ultimate development of a draft strategic plan to present to the new board if and when the measure passes in November, one of the big reasons to have this conversation today is that the concepts are refined to a stage where we're really looking to see which elements of the concepts that different members of the board would be interested in taking a leadership in and pursuing. So for example, we talked to Dr. Yamamoto about his leadership in data sharing and management, given all of his vast experience. But we've had, there are opportunities here for all board members, as Maria goes through the various themes, to be heavily involved as we continue to refine these strategic concepts looking to the fall. So as you're hearing all this, please give some thought to what in particular you would like to help with, and all comers welcome. Thank you.
Unmuted. So I think we've had a pretty robust conversation regarding the elements of the slide deck. The only one that I didn't really, so the new clinical paradigms with phase 4 trials, platform trials, shared controls, consortium trials, that something that former FDA Commissioner Gottlieb, as well as the current CBER lead director, Peter Marks, have been an advocate for, where you could actually have some shared elements that can be performed by different groups, and then they could have the data sets combined for submission for approval of a product. Those are the things that we are able to do because of how we are constructed, and the fact that CIRM does act as a hub. And so there are many different opportunities. I want to acknowledge the folks who have worked very hard and looking through many of these different considerations. Abla Creasy, who is our VP of Therapeutics, Pat Olson, our retired annuitant expert, have led this group in thinking through, along with the science office, and I want to thank them for driving these conversations. And so when Chairman Thomas, as you mentioned, driving to particular concepts and all that, although we have by no means something that's ready for the board, there are some starting points that we could already start working with the board on if there are areas of interest and priorities. And the team is positioned and ready to do that with lots of information to bring, as well as additional connections in it to add to those you may already have to bring in as external advisors. So for strategic partnerships, we have one that we've already have had very good experience with, which is the NHLBI funding partnership. It's not just a co-funding partnership. We're able to, figure out how to best use the resources that both the NIH and CIRM have to make it better than the sum of its parts. And so that's something in development. That's a type of thing we'd like to be able to do with different types of organizations that bring something that may be complementary to CIRM while still having some shared objectives, including organizations that may have real outreach to the patient groups and the various areas, for instance, in some of the areas like the Michael J. Fox Foundation for Parkinson's as an example, where they've already started to create registries and resources that would be relevant and where CIRM translational programs may be of interest. So those are just kind of some examples of the various types of potential ways that we could partner with other stakeholders. And if there are no questions on that, I'm going to move to the next topic, if that's okay. So theme 2 is build pathways to commercialization. And as presented earlier, we've had an increasing amount of industry pull. And it's the product of the CIRM de-risking high quality science and enabling programs to be the best positioned to achieve progress so that they can be partnered. Building on this, next slide. We believe there's an opportunity to build pathways to commercialization and to create best-in-class investment and create commercialization partnerships to do so. So we can leverage, we have advisory panel mechanisms in-house as well as internal expertise to help kind of start the conversation and put people in touch with the right people. We'd like to formalize a process so that similar to how our applicants, our grantees get input in terms of their scientific plan, that they also get input with regards to their plan that would be relevant in terms of downstream considerations in terms of how this could be scaled. And we already have some starting point kind of groups. We have an industry alliance program of investors and corporate, as well as platform companies who are interested in the CIRM portfolio. And we could leverage and formalize that relationship as well as build upon it to do such a thing. The second piece is a little bit more tangible. This is the idea of attracting and facilitating economic development in California for regenerative medicine. As was mentioned earlier, the USC group had conducted an economic impact report and reported to this board last year in terms of the CIRM's impact as a granting agency and the impact we've had in the economy by funding awards and stimulating research and early development. But as the field continues to mature, this whole idea of stimulating economic development is almost a natural progression of where we need to go, because there are very clear needs, such as the need for commercial manufacturing that can successfully take our very complex programs and successfully bring them into wider distribution in a affordable fashion. And having spoken to stakeholders on both sides, both on the academic GMP and developer sides, early stage sponsors, as well as investors and those interested in building manufacturing capacity in California, we think that there could be a way that to create public-private partnership where the academic, we can facilitate, incentivize, and help structure effective public-private partnerships between academic GMPs and commercial manufacturing. Commercial manufacturing entities don't have the kind of the know-how expertise for these innovative technologies. They're seeking that. They'd like to be able to, they know that this is a field that's expanding. They'd like to be able to build that expertise in addition to the workforce development that Senator Torres had mentioned, which is going to be critical. There's also this idea of how do you infuse the know-how and the expertise and that kind of, you know, the really subtle things that make a big difference. When you take a tech transfer from a phase 1 to GMP facility in academia and try to scale it up to commercial. And so this push in of expertise and pull out type of exchange of information, we believe there is a pathway for doing this and through funding opportunities. We would not propose to invest huge amounts in terms of bricks and mortar, and I don't believe that there's money for that in the new initiative, but there are those who are already interested in doing that. And what we would do is facilitate our academic groups in contributing kind of the intellectual capital, the know-how, and the expertise, and together build this specialized enterprise within California. Are there any comments on that topic? Maria, I don't know. I don't see hand raising, so I'm not able to tell if anybody's trying to.
I don't see any.
Okay, so then the next part is a little bit more straightforward. We have done site visits across our academic institutions, our funded institutions, with the Office of Technology and Licensing, and we do believe that there is a way to partner and optimize the value of our programs by inserting clarity and also ways to assist our programs in attracting best-in-class commercialization partners. CIRM would like to have special attention to their portfolio programs with folks who are very familiar with this type of technology platform, and CIRM kind of regulations and those are kind of just the detailed how-tos of it. But I think just in general, crafting partnerships that go all the way from, you know, big picture all the way to the logistics, we believe will add value for our programs. If there are no comments on that, I'm going to go to the next topic.
Okay, get ready.
Next slide, please. And on that, so our business development group, Shyam Patel and Sohail Talib, as well as Ben Huang from legal, were very instrumental in kind of driving some of those concepts to this stage. Theme 3 is increased patient access, a topic that really kind of embodies a lot of the things that we talked about. And as you can see, there are 3 major components to this: patient navigation, and Senator Torres had mentioned navigators earlier in terms of improving access to care; community partnership. Isabel, you and I were just talking about that a little while ago. And then the treatment access and coverage, which is a TBD. This is a group that's going to have to be built. It's a system that's going to need to be, it's going to be a new program within CIRM, something that's accounted for in the new initiative. So I'm just going to focus initially on the first 2. And Maria Bonneville, who many of you have spoken to about this, is leading this group along with Jeff Lomax, who's our senior officer for policy, as well as manages the Alpha Clinics Network. And so the patient navigation piece really is based on kind of how do you do this? How do you navigate patients in this very complex world? Also, you have the noise of the stem cell tourism and these bad actors in the background kind of preying on folks trying to take their money with unproven and potentially harmful treatments. Information and knowledge is power, but where do you get that? So embedded in all of the discussions we had around data and data management and a data architecture, all that, kind of when you distill kind of the big pieces and outcomes of that, it needs to be something that can then be captured and that has information such as what Isabel had mentioned earlier in terms of what is a true outcome for the different groups. So communities actually know what these treatments are and what they mean, and what does it mean when you're pursuing this versus that. So the idea of building a appropriate, not by itself, but integrated within all of other programs deriving from it, data registries and outcome registries, and deriving from the educational resources that are available and accessible to all the different populations that are appropriate to those populations and are sensitive to their triggers, because there are definitely historical triggers, as was mentioned earlier, about trust. And in addition, another component is training and certification, which we mentioned in the education program for patient navigators and counselors. And that would be multi-tiered, multiple level type of community outreach folks, from those who have degrees to those who don't have degrees, but have a special role to play in the interaction and facilitating knowledge access and referrals. And to leverage the power, we have funded many amazing academic tertiary care institutions in California. And as this technology is maturing, it's going to go out into the real world. So leveraging the power of the clinical networks to empower these community centers, to empower them so that they can then own it and enable adoption with their own communities, so that the information, the way the referrals go, all of the kind of the systems are all coordinated. So that's kind of just the broad topics around patient navigation. That was very well informed by our patient navigation workshop at the JP Morgan conference, where we had attendees such as the head of policy at Verily, who was a previous FDA commissioner, former CMS commissioner, administrator, the head of CBER at the FDA, patient advocates, market access directors from gene therapy companies that have already brought their programs to the market, and those that are about to, and just multiple stakeholders have really, we've gotten a lot of information and additional material to go through for those is interested in that. Any comments on that topic? Okay. And then community partners. And this whole idea is something that was really illustrated by our very powerful conversations we've had during this COVID program announcement and funding, and Ms. Daron, on your leadership in terms of making sure that we don't let it go, and we just actually, think about it in all different ways. So how do we expand this outreach? Not just that we're going out there and telling everybody what we have, but having that feedback loop saying, okay, that's what you got. This is our concern, and here's some things, and how does that get incorporated? And so creating that kind of pathway of communication feedback loop that actually shape how we do things, such as what we're doing with considering language for our program announcements. And here is a piece that is new. CIRM does not currently fund public health research. We don't currently fund healthcare economics research. But with all the things that we have to grapple with in terms of bringing these types of therapies to patients, with all of the challenges that we're going to face, that will be shaped and impacted by social determinants of health, historical barriers, healthcare delivery, and access, and we're going to have an access group. That's something that we wanted to bring to the board. It's something we don't currently fund, and it's something we'd like to bring to your attention and hear your thoughts on that. It doesn't have to be today, but if you happen to have any thoughts on it today, I'm happy to hear it. No takers. Maria?
I don't see any hands.
Okay. And then
sorry, Maria.
Okay. Yes,
Maria, Isabel here. Sorry, you went so fast I couldn't unmute. Can I just say whoopee? Whoopee! Yay! Thank you. Fabulous. I love this.
So I assume that means that you would be in favor of the board really taking this up then, the idea of public health research?
Yes, well, it's so crucial. To me, it's so crucial what we learn about our underserved communities that can end up serving all communities. So to me, it's a win-win. I appreciate you really giving this some thought, because all of this I think is super crucial for moving forward and really being inclusive. Thank you.
Thank you. And we were going to have our Surgeon General as a speaker at this meeting, right? Senator Torres, but we have to reschedule. And her area of expertise is adverse childhood events and how that impacts. And she's some of the discussions we had is how the physiologic and cellular models for that. So it's not just that it's going to be in isolation. It's how does it go along with the science as well. And then the third TBD is treatment access and coverage. And we just need to build a team with the expertise in these areas of healthcare economics, market access, and insurance coverage in order to even really address what that would look like. Any comments on that? All right. So I'm then going to the next slide. Doug, please. And you notice the asterisk there, right, Isabel, in the last slide, which said that in all of these programs, the issue of diversity, inclusion, and proportionality would all be embedded in the programs.
I did. You just didn't see me jump up and dance.
Okay. And then theme 4 is maximizing impact through operational excellence. And this is all good, but unless we actually build it into our system, we're not going to be able to impact. And so Gil and his team and our grants management team, as well as our IT and other science officers who are also involved in this, are already poised and ready to go in terms of how do we embed this into our application review contracting levers with IT and data architecture and operations serving, and this is my poetic, as a cable to integrate and standardize the approaches for all these things we're trying to impact. I call them a cable because they're very, very strong. As you can tell, by the way, they've been able to run every 2-week COVID program announcement reviews. And then in addition to integrate and standardize the new elements into application review and tracking, all things are very good ideas, but unless you do things like have a way for people to deposit data, format, where to go, requirements, it's just not going to happen. Unless you have specifically an area where folks need to include their plans and considerations of the underrepresented, underserved, minority, and vulnerable communities, just not going to happen. So this needs to be embedded in all aspects of how we do business. And then there's kind of just the operational pieces of in achieving some of these new initiatives, what kind of program announcements, additional funding opportunities would be best suited to accelerate and augment these efforts. And this group, Theme 4, is something that's co-led by Gail Sombrano and Jennifer Lewis. And in all of these groups, by the way, the CIRM team, the entire CIRM team has been involved in the conversations throughout all these 4 themes. And this is something that is a continual conversation, and so that we're ready to go once you guys are ready to go in terms of digging deeper. So anyway, that next slide, I believe that's it. I'm happy to take any additional questions or input comments at this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Milan, for that very thoughtful piece of work. And thank you to all that contributed to it, which basically is everybody at CIRM. A very good strategic concept document from which to build on going forward. Are there any additional comments by members of the board?
I think it's just a tour de force, an amazing presentation or concepts. and presentation. Thank you, Maria, et al.
Thank you, Dr. Martin.
Any other comments? Maria, do you see any hands up?
I do not see any hands waved, but I say just jump in.
I exhausted everybody. It's time for lunch. Even Isabel are quiet.
She's giggling, so we can hear something.
I think David
has.
Quick comment.
Yay, David.
Maria's next to me on the screen. I was poking her in the ear.
Yeah, I see that.
No, I just wanted to make sure, and this is probably trivial, but that the good work that you've just presented here, which is phenomenal, that make sure that that gets into people's hands and heads when they decide how to vote in November, because that's not just between now and November, that's from November going forward. And it's very important that people understand just how good the programs are and how well thought out they are and how well in advance they're thought out.
Well, I'm not permitted to be involved in any of that, so. Maria Bonneville?
Yes. Yes. There are no more. I don't think anyone else is.
But I appreciate that comment. Dr. Higgins, thank you very much.
Does anyone else have anything?
Isabel here. To follow Dave's point, and as a communicator, I do think it's really important that some way or another, the community understands way beyond the science how this is important to people's health and how it's supposed to impact all Californians' health in one measure or another, and how sensitive CIRM is to the impacts, the utilization of this kind of science, and how it means at some point or another, at some time or another, it can impact them and their families and their communities. And I think that message needs to get out there throughout California. I don't know who will do that. Maybe that's back to Bob's job. I'm not sure, but it's really important to have that messaging. I agree with David. Somehow maybe we can't be involved, but whoever can get those clear messages out that this impacts all Californians and all people's health on one way or another, at one time or another, I think they should hear it.
So just to be clear, you can't advocate the message, but the information in your presentation today could be just disseminated.
It is public.
Correct?
Yes, it's been posted publicly.
Mm-hmm.
I do think, Mr. Owen, that we can be confident that Bob will emphasize the points you've made and many more. He was very comprehensive in his approach to the campaign and to these themes. So I think we'll be well represented in the campaign effort.
And I hope in multiple languages, JT.
Well, I need to check with Bob how he is in multiple languages. But
Community support.
yes.
Find it there with the community educators, and patient navigators, etc.
No question about it. That point very well taken. Okay, well thank you, Dr. Milan, and all members of the team for an excellent presentation. This is a work in progress. As I said earlier on, I would strongly recommend members of the board, if there are particular areas of interest, please contact Maria's and me, and we will make sure to integrate you into the process even more fully. So that concludes the discussion items. We're now into public comment. Do any members of the public have anything they'd like to speak about on any topic? Maria?
Yes, from the 858 number. If you'd like to make public comment. Press *9 and you can start. Hello?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you. You have
Okay,
3
sorry.
minutes. Thank you.
All right. So this is Dr. Paul Lakin. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of ViaCyte. ViaCyte is a CIRM-supported California company that is working to deliver stem cell-derived cell replacement therapy as a potential cure for type 1 diabetes. This has been a huge challenge, and we've worked on this for about a decade. And while there's still a lot of work to be done, we have made tremendous progress with 2 exciting products being evaluated in the clinic and a third rapidly approaching that stage. Last year, for the first time, we demonstrated the ability of a stem cell-derived candidate to generate insulin as measured by the biomarker C-peptide in patients that had no detectable C-peptide production when they were enrolled in the study. I just want to emphasize this progress would not have been possible without the strong financial and expert support from CIRM and the CIRM staff. Not only has that support fueled our efforts, our CIRM work has advanced the field with other companies building on the foundation that we've built. While that represents competition for ViaCyte, it's great news for patients and for the field in general. So I just, again, want to say that this progress would not have been possible without CIRM. And as both a scientist and a business person, I strongly support the further funding for CIRM and the CIRM 3.0 initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul, and congratulations again on your successful Series D raise. We're all pulling for you as we pull for all of our grantees and everybody involved in regenerative medicine research. We appreciate all your hard work. Maria, any other comments?
Let me look. I do not see any more hands raised.
Okay, well, a few shout outs here. First, to all the science officers and their teams in navigating this difficult period with our grantees and what the shutdown has meant to all projects. It's involved many challenges, and you guys have done a tremendous job. Special shout out as well to Dr. Sombrano and the review team. The professionalism in pulling the COVID round together on top of everything you normally do has been most impressive. From the first moment I broached the subject of a COVID round with Dr. Milan, it took all of 6 days for Dr. Sombrano and his team to prepare the revised program announcement that triggered this entire COVID round, and then the 5 subsequent grants working group meetings and board meetings that have followed. You guys have done a fantastic job. Want also to give a real shout out to Maria B, who makes all the trains run on time and is continues to make sure everybody does their job, which is no mean feat. So thank you. And to Doug and Tricia for putting together this meeting. The Zoom effort, I think, has worked very well. We've been able to run this very efficiently, and so thank you for that. And then a last shout out to, I want to thank everybody's dogs for not barking during the board meeting, much appreciated. And finally, in closing, to paraphrase Hamilton, we are truly living in a world turned upside down right now. And may all of you and your families stay safe and healthy as we continue to navigate these most unsettling times. So with that, we are concluded here and we stand adjourned. Thank you, everyone. And we will see you in the next application review subcommittee for the next round of COVID grants in a couple weeks. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.